In this video, we'll show you what happened in Book 2 of A Game of Thrones compared to Season 2 of the HBO adaptation, and what was left out because it was too dark. We'll use vertical footage on the right to remind you of what happened in the TV show, plus the Game of Thrones comic book, so you can see for yourself why the books were actually better. We'll also put forward the idea that Daenerys was completely ruined because they didn't follow the books. So even if you are a show watcher only who has never read the books, we'll give you the real Daenerys Targaryen as best we can. In our Stannis and Melisandre video, we summarize the first 6 comic books of A Clash of Kings. In this video, we'll cover the next 6. We'll also summarize each chapter of A Clash of Kings, which is Book 2 in the series, and was pretty much just used for Season 2, so stay watching. But first, winter is the perfect time to cozy up at home with a mobile game that you can really get stuck into. I've discovered this amazing game that's available on both mobile and PC. You can even seamlessly switch between devices, playing on them alternately. In this game, there are over 800 incredible champions, ranging from lizard-like creatures to elves, orcs, dwarves, and demons, each one looking exceptionally cool. My personal favourite champion is Sir Nicholas of Sacred Order faction. Sir Nicholas is a powerful HB-based champion. He's a Void legendary champion, so he's already top tier. His skill multipliers let him hit hard, and his second skill places a valuable shield that is based on damage dealt. He can also place unkillable and continuous heal buffs to help protect your team further. He's particularly great for clan boss, faction wars, and spider's den, but he's viable in all areas of the game. Another awesome champion in my collection is Worlim Frostking of Knights Revenant faction. Worlim Frostking is great for early and mid-game players in need of someone to help in the arena. He can decrease the enemy's crit damage and accuracy, as well as place valuable buffs such as increased defense, strengthen, protect veil, and increase crit damage. If you're into collecting awesome characters and simply having a great time with beautiful gameplay, click the link in the description or scan the QR code. Join me in the adventure. The holidays are just around the corner, and Raid Shadow Legends is here with a massive present for you to unwrap. The Cursed City is one of Raid's biggest features since the Doom Tower, with 100 stages to complete, including stages where you'll need to take down 2 of Raid's bosses at the same time. As you work your way through the Cursed City, complete its various quests, and you can even get your hands on a mythical champion. So make sure you download Raid Shadow Legends this holiday season, and don't miss out on all the festive goodness. With all this exciting stuff and more coming to Raid, if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses available only via my link. We are talking silver, XP brews, and chickens. Once you're in and crushing your enemies, come find me under the name Vidra and join my clan, and we'll be legends together. So just hit my link in the description and I'll see you on the battlefield. Once again, thanks to Raid for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to click the link in the description or scan my QR code on the screen. Daenerys Targaryen issues a directive to a small Khalasar, urging them to trail the red comet known to the Dothraki as Shirak Kaya, the Bleeding Star. Among the elder members, whispers circulate about its ominous connotations. However, Daenerys associates its appearance with the night of her husband Khal Drogo's cremation and the birth of her dragons. As such, she perceives it as a precursor of her destiny. Her handmaiden, Doria, explains that the direction the comet leads to is occupied solely by the desolate and fearsome Redlands. Despite the grim protest, Daenerys finds herself with limited alternatives. The other Khalasars exert their influence to the north. The Lazarian hold ground in the south, and Khal Pono is leading slaves towards Slavers Bay in the west. In her defense, Daenerys points out that Bono had always treated her kindly. Nonetheless, Ser Jorah Mormont reminds her that Bono was the first to abandon her and is now a potential threat. Daenerys argues her possession of dragons as a form of protection. Jorah counters that the dragon hatchlings could easily be targeted, while Pono might aim to seize them, given their immense value. Daenerys firmly asserts her ownership of the dragons and emphasizes that they will remain under her control while she lives. Despite her resolve, Jorah maintains that her survival hinges on venturing where others dare not tread. Mounted on her silver mare and draped in a white Haraka pelt to conceal her bald head, Daenerys issues a command to her people to follow the comet. This decision faces no objections. Her status as the unburnt and mother of dragons lends her authority, and her word is law. Under the cover of night, they journey forward, leaving behind a trail of deceased horses, since Pono, Jacko, and their comrades have taken the finest mounts. Among her followers are the frail and marginalized, so Daenerys must exude confidence and strength to inspire them. After 3 days of traveling, the weakest members of her group begin to succumb. The Red Waste offers scarce subsistence and even less water. As their supplies dwindle, they are compelled to subsist on horseflesh, causing the death toll to rise. Daenerys shares in the hardship endured by her people, experiencing significant weight loss and losing her ability to nurse her dragons due to dried up milk. Her dragons refuse the meat she initially offers until she recalls her brother Viserys claiming that only men and dragons consume cooked meat. Subsequently, the dragons readily consume a substantial amount of seared meat each day, leading to their growth and well-being. Every night, Daenerys allows one of the dragons to perch on her shoulder, while Irri and Jiqui transport the other two in a cage, suspended between their horses. On a certain day, Aggo suggests that her black dragon is the reincarnation of Balerion. Daenerys recollects that her ancestors Aegon I Targaryen's dragons were named after the deities of Old Valyria. Nevertheless, she chooses to name hers after individuals whom the gods have taken from her. The green and bronze dragon is dubbed Rhaegal, after her brother Rhaegar Targaryen. The cream and gold one is named Viserion, after her brother Viserys. And the black and scarlet dragon is called Drogon, in honor of her late husband, Drogo. Despite her dragons thriving, her Khalasar steadily dwindles. Insufficient horses forces some to walk instead. Doria, who has been ailing, falls victim to a fever and eventually becomes too feeble to mount her horse. Daenerys halts the group and personally tends to the girl who taught her the art of seducing Khal Drogo, offering comfort by holding her hand until her passing. As the harsh conditions persist, the Dothraki start to fear that the comet has guided them to a kind of hell. Even Daenerys herself begins to lose hope. Seeking guidance, she consults Ser Jorah to inquire whether the wastelands has an end. He reassures her that there is an end, though the path ahead is more treacherous than he had initially envisioned. Daenerys notes that the knight is still recovering from the injury he sustained while battling Otho. Yet he remains resolute that their only recourse is to continue moving forward. After a few days have passed, the scouts who range ahead of her group come back with information about an unfamiliar city, about which even Ser Jorah lacks knowledge. She dispatches her loyal blood riders, Aggo, Jogo, and Rakaro, to investigate the city. When they return with their findings that the city lies abandoned, Jiqui expresses her belief that such places are inhabited by restless spirits and thus should be avoided. Despite the advice, Daenerys remains undeterred and leads her Khalasar into the vacant city. Within its confines, she passes by an empty pedestal and ponders whether the statue it once held now graces the city of Vaes Dothrak. They discover fruit trees and clean water, yet also come across scattered bones. Irri expresses concerns about the presence of ghosts, but Daenerys assures her that her dragons hold more power. Nevertheless, their immediate needs for subsistence and resources take precedence. Once Daenerys settles into her tent and takes a sand bath, Ser Jorah joins her with a peach as a gift, which she relishes. She remarks that the gods have been kind in guiding them to the location, prompting Jorah to suggest they rest and regain their strength. Daenerys mentions that her handmaidens are wary of spirits, and Jorah points out that ghosts can be found everywhere. This leads Daenerys to reflect on her own losses and inquire about Ser Jorah's personal ghost. He discloses the name of his second wife, the beautiful Lynesse Hightower. Upon further prompting, Jorah recounts his life story. He hails from the remote Bear Island, which is cold and austere. His first wife, Aglova, whom he cared for in his own way, suffered 3 miscarriages and died after a decade of marriage. Afterward, he fought in the Greyjoy Rebellion, earning his knighthood by following Thoros of Myr into battle at Pike. Later, he attended a tourney near Lannisport, where he met Lynesse and made an impressive showing in a joust against Jaime Lannister. They were wed in a hasty ceremony after he won the tournament and declared her the Queen of Love and Beauty. However, Lynesi was dissatisfied with life on Bear Island. Jorah spent heavily to fulfill her desires, even participating in tournaments to no avail. Each defeat led to the loss of armor and horses, depleting his resources. Unable to part with her jewelry, he resorted to morally questionable actions for money. Upon learning that Eddard Stark was coming to punish him, Jorah fled with Lynesi to Lys. Their wealth vanished in a short time, forcing Jorah to become a sellsword. During his absence for battles, Lynesi moved in with a wealthy merchant named Tregar Ormelin. When asked, Jorah admits he both despises and loves Lynesi. As he takes his leave, Daenerys inquires about Lynesi's appearance, to which Jorah replies that she resembled Daenerys herself. Once he departs, Daenerys comes to a realization that Jorah's affection goes beyond her role as a queen. He desires her as a woman. Attempting to envision a romantic connection between them, she finds it futile. She also observes his yearning to return to Bear Island. Although she knows they cannot be together, she holds on to the hope of one day restoring his home and honor. That night, her dreams involve flying on dragons with Drogo. The following morning, she gathers her blood riders and assigns them a task. Argo is to head southwest, Ricaro south, and Jogo southeast. Each is to take 3 healthy horses and ample supplies to scout the surroundings. While awaiting their return to the city, now dubbed Vase Doloro, the Khalasar is afforded the opportunity to recuperate. Daenerys attends to the healing of Ser Jorah's hip wound, which is showing signs of improvement. Ricaro is the first to return with news that the desolate terrain stretches southward all the way to the ocean. Daenerys appoints him in charge of tilling the plaza to encourage the growth of more grass for the horses. Argo follows, having discovered 2 smaller abandoned cities. Daenerys assigns him the task of repairing the city gates. Jogo is the last to come back, much later, accompanied by 3 peculiarly attired individuals from the grand city of Qarth: the formidable warlock Prat Pri, the influential merchant prince Xaro Kondaxos of the 13, and the enigmatic Quaithe of the Shadow. Their purpose is to locate dragons, a claim that Daenerys boldly affirms they have found. So, this chapter has hints of a very wild theory that the Red Waste is a radioactive wasteland, and this is why many of the cities lay abandoned. This is also what causes Doria to die from a wasting sickness, since her death sounds eerily familiar to radioactive poisoning. Doria grew gaunt and hollowed-eyed, and her soft golden hair turned brittle as straw. Doria took a fever and died shivering. All these are symptoms of radiation sickness. Further evidence for this comes from the fact that the Qartheen are pale, and their walls show murals of lush greenery, which might be interpreted as what the land was like before whatever disaster befell the region, like Chernobyl. Also, in the world of Ice and Fire, there is no section on Qarth, which might be interpreted as George has mysteries that he wants to reveal in The Winds of Winter or A Dream for Spring to the reader about why Westeros is the way it is. In Chapter 13, the deserted settlement of Whitetree is encompassed by an enormous tree that Jon Snow finds awe-inspiring. This weirwood tree casts its shade over the entire village, yet it's not its sheer size that unsettles Jon the most. What truly unnerves him is the tree's face, with its jagged mouth large enough to swallow a sheep and containing human bones. Lord Commander Mormont remarks on the tree's age, to which Jon adds that it possesses a formidable presence as well. Theron Smallwood expresses his newfound understanding of why people were initially apprehensive about the heart trees when they first arrived in Westeros, and chopped them down. Jon responds by recounting his father's belief that no one could tell a lie in front of a heart tree, and Mormont confirms that his own father held the same view. Mormont then instructs Jon to retrieve a burnt skull from the ashes, and as Jon reaches for it, he discovers another skull beneath. While examining the skull, Mormont reflects on his regret for not asking why the wildlings burned their dead when there were still some around to inquire. Jon, remembering the wight he battled, is certain he knows the reason. Contemplating the potential revelations if bones could speak, Mormont orders a search of the houses. Jon is partnered with Edison Tollett, affectionately known as Dolorous Ed. While they conduct their search, Dolorous Ed laments the fact that the dead are now not only walking, but also expected to talk. He humorously suggests that the deceased might tell lies or endlessly complain. Upon entering one of the houses, Jon observes the bare dirt floor and lack of furnishings, remarking that it's a bleak place to live. Dolorous Edd responds by sharing that he was born in such a house, but then fell on hard times. As anticipated, their search yields no results. White Tree is the fourth village they've combed through, and each one has been equally empty. When Jon inquires about his thoughts on what might have transpired here, Dolorous Edd confesses he'd rather not even imagine. Upon returning, they come across Chet, who is fervently employing the hounds in his search and expressing his frustration with curses. When Jon locks eye with Chet, it's evident that they don't harbour any affection for each other. Thorin Smallwood, donning the late Sir Jeremy Riker's armour and cloak, takes on a more lordly appearance than Mormont. He asserts that wildlings were present here about a year ago. Jarman Buckwell counters by pointing out that much can change in a year. Sir Meladar Locke suggests that fewer wildlings mean fewer concerns. Subsequently, Bedwick, a Dumative ranger known as Giant, descends from the colossal tree and reports the presence of a lake to the north and a low hill to the west. With 3 hours of daylight remaining, Mormont decides to lead the group toward the lake to establish their camp. After composing a report for Maester Aemon, the Lord Commander sends Jon to locate Samuel Tarly for message delivery. Jarman Buckwell's scouts head out first, followed by Thorin Smallwood's advance group. Mormont's main contingent, the supply convoy led by Sir Melador Locke, and finally, the rear guard under Sir Otten Withers, totaling 200 men and 300 horses. During his ride, Jon exercises his scarred fingers to prevent his sword hand from becoming stiff and unwieldy, recognizing the likelihood of needing it beyond the wall, especially now. The Black brothers initially departed from Castle Black in high spirits, but the eerie silence of the forest has unnerved them all. Not only have the wildlings vanished, but the game as well. Even the seasoned rangers concur that the haunted forest has never appeared this haunted before. Jon locates Sam tending to the horses, carrying the raven cages. Some of the raven's screeches almost sound like words, and Jon humorously asks if Sam is teaching them to talk. Sam explains that 3 of them are trained to say, "Snow." Jon remarks that one raven uttering his name is sufficient. When Sam inquires about White Tree, Jon conveys Mormont's report to him. Sam dispatches a raven with the message, expressing a wish that it could carry him back as well. When Jon privately reflects on Sam's fears, he admits that Sam is gradually growing less afraid, a development that surprises him given Sam's self-professed cowardice in contrast to the bravery of the other 200 men who left the wall. Sam mentions that he's feeling a bit achy from the rugged conditions, but is diligently working on his maps. Jon playfully teases the idea of assigning Sam as an outrider, to which Sam vehemently objects. Sam then confesses that he had hoped they would be able to stay in a village with proper shelter. In response, Jon points out the shortage of houses available for everyone and continues on his way. As Jon is steering clear of the crowded procession to avoid congestion, Ghost, who has been hunting at a distance from the marching line, reappears. The White Wolf, much like the foragers, hasn't had much success in finding prey. Jon recalls mentioning to Tywin that their large group might be scaring off the game, but Tywin simply concurred that something was indeed frightening the animals away. Upon rejoining Mormont, Jon mentions that Sam is teaching the ravens to mimic speech. Mormont dismisses it with a snort, remarking that the ravens make a lot of noise but don't convey anything worthwhile. They continue riding in silence for a while before Jon brings up what his uncle Benjen might have thought about the deserted villages. Mormont expands on Jon's reflection, suggesting that Benjen would have pressed forward to uncover the reasons behind it, and there may have been forces preventing that knowledge from coming to light. Mormont declares that with the addition of Corran Halfhand, they will be a formidable force of 300 men, not easily dealt with by an adversary. He promises Jon that they will find them, but Jon wonders if they'll be found instead. So this chapter was completely cut from the show, but White Tree seems to display evidence of human sacrifice. This foreshadows the events of Bran III, A Dance with Dragons, when Bran drinks the weirwood paste and his consciousness blends with a weirwood tree. Then, a human sacrifice takes place in front of weirwood and Bran, as the tree drinks the blood of the sacrificed to make himself stronger. In Chapter 14, Arya perceives the river as a calm and tranquil place, but that changes when Kos discovers the remains of a soldier hidden among the reeds. In response, Yoren instructs Dober to inspect the body for valuable items, realizing they cannot cross the river at this point. Yoren takes Kos upstream while dispatching Woth and Jeren downstream to locate a shallow crossing. During this wait, Lomi and Tabli playfully engage in splashing and mud throwing at Hot Pie, while Arya observes Kurz catching a fish with his bare hands, imagining it might be simpler than catching cats. The scouts return around midday, reporting the discovery of a burnt village. Yoren sketches a map in the mud, explaining that the river flows south from the God's Eye. Since they cannot cross without abandoning their wagons, their original plan to travel along the western shore of the lake becomes unfeasible. Going east would lead them back to the King's Road. Consequently, Yoren decides to head north, where the river meets the lake. There, they plan to sell their possessions in the nearby town, hire a boat, and sail across the lake to reach Harrentown. At Harrentown, they can purchase new horses or seek refuge at Harrenhal, the residence of Lady Sheila Went, a known ally of the Night's Watch. Despite Hot Pie's concerns about encountering ghosts at Harrenhal, Yoren dismisses them. Arya recalls the tales of Old Nan about the evil King Harren and how Aegon used dragons to turn the castle into a blazing inferno. According to Old Nan, fiery spirits still haunt the castle, and sometimes people who sleep there are found burnt to death in the morning. However, Arya remains skeptical of these stories. She expects knights at Harrenhal, not ghosts, and hopes to reveal her identity to Lady Went, gaining assistance to return home. As they continue their journey, they pass empty cottages and neglected fields. Upon reaching the deserted town, Arya becomes anxious, wondering what could have driven the residents away. In response to the unsettling atmosphere, Yoren assigns 10 recruits to guard the wagons and divides the remaining group to search the town, while he investigates a tower house. Yoren chooses Woth, who once rode on a galley, to lead Arya, Gendry, Hot Pie, and Lomi in the search for boats. The docks are barren except for a decaying rowboat, and Arya realizes that the inhabitants had taken all the boats when they fled. Lomi and Hot Pie suggest exploring a nearby inn for food and ale, but Woth insists on adhering to Yoren's instructions. Feeling disheartened, Arya washes her face in the lake and briefly contemplates the idea of swimming all the way to Winterfell. Woth raises his voice, urging her to assist in the search, so she complies. However, their efforts only yield some sails and nails. Darkness falls as Yoren returns, reporting that the tower house is vacant. He dismisses proposals to repair the rowboat or construct a new one, but shows interest in Gendry's suggestion of a raft. Nevertheless, a raft would require leaving the wagons and staying close to the shore, so Yoren decides to sleep on the idea. Lomi suggests staying at the inn, but Yoren opts for the holdfast due to its protective wall. Arya argues against staying altogether, given that even the Lord has fled. Lomi taunts her for being fearful, but Yoren acknowledges her rational as wise, emphasizing that the Night's Watch remains neutral, with no one as their adversary. Arya privately reflects that no one is their ally either, but refrains from speaking to avoid appearing cowardly. The holdfast is encircled by a 10-foot wall made of rough-cut stone, with iron bars securing the front gate. In addition to the main gate, there is a postern to the north and a narrow tunnel leading to the lake shore, concealed beneath the barn. Yoren instructs them to position a wagon over the trapdoor to prevent unwanted entry. He also assigns 3 watchers and stations Taba, Kurz, and Cutjack to keep a lookout from the tower house, with Kurz instructed to sound his hunting horn if danger approaches. They bring their wagons and animals inside and secure the main gate. During the meal, Dober, Gendry, and Arya are tasked with cooking duties, and Arya is assigned to pluck the goose and 2 chickens brought in by Kos, while Gendry splits wood and Yoren sharpens his dirk. The atmosphere is subdued during dinner. Even Lomi remains silent. Arya is on the second watch, but as sleep eludes her, she borrows Yoren's whetstone to sharpen needle instead. Hot Pie inquires about the origins of her fine sword more politely than before, and she admits that her brother gave it to her. Hot Pie is surprised, as Arya has never mentioned any brothers. Arya responds that she has several brothers, but when Hot Pie asks whether they are older or younger than her, she fibs, claiming they are all older. armed with long swords, and they taught her how to defend herself against people who trouble her. Hot Pie insists he was only making conversation before leaving her be. As she curls up on her pallet, Arya is annoyed by the continual sobbing of the crying girl. Arya experiences a dream where a wolf is abruptly waking her up. She quickly puts on her boots and inquires if anyone else heard the sound. Lomi ridicules her, suggesting that she has wolves on her mind, while Wath and Jaren reassure her that the wolves are safely outside. Arya insists that there was indeed a wolf, and just before the others can dismiss her claim, they all hear Kurz blowing the hunting horn. Instantly, everyone starts getting dressed and preparing their weapons, and Arya rushes toward the gate. While passing by the barn, Jaqen H'ghar calls out to her, urging her to release the criminals so they can join the fight. But she ignores his request. Climbing onto the parapet, Arya catches a glimpse of numerous men carrying torches and setting the town ablaze. Gendry inquires about their numbers, but they are moving too swiftly to be counted accurately. Before long, a group of riders approach the holdfast. Arya thinks their banners might be red, but the flames from the town cast everything in shades of red, orange, or black. Coming to a halt in front of the gates, a knight wearing a spiked helmet demands that they open the gates in name of the king. Rayson sarcastically asks which king he is referring to, earning him a rebuke from Wath. When Yoren explains that the townsfolk have vacated the area, the knight speculates that Yoren might belong to Beric Dondarrion's group, with Thoros of Myr possibly hiding among them. Yoren asserts that he only has a group of young recruits for the Night's Watch, and offers his black cloak as proof. However, the Knight's standard bearer insists that it could also bear House Dondarrion's emblem, a purple lighting bolt on a black background. Arya recognizes the Lannister banner at this point and recalls that Beric Dondarrion was the man her father sent to confront Sir Gregor Clegane. The Knight demands that they open the gate or be branded as outlaws, but Yoren wants to know who is leading the group. A stout man displaying a manticore on his shield rides forward and introduces himself as Sir Amory Lorch, a vassal of Lord Tywin Lannister. He repeats the order to open the holdfast in name of the true king, Joffrey Baratheon. Yoren asserts that it makes no difference to him if they burn the town, but his group is not their enemies and should be left alone. Arya finds it puzzling that the raiders cannot see that they are neither lords nor knights, but Gendry believes that they simply don't care. Arya observes Sir Amory's expression the way Syrio Forel taught her and realizes that Gendry is correct. Sir Amory insists that his men need to verify Yoren's story, but Yoren senses a trap and declines once more. Lorch's men ridicule the elderly recruiter, and Lorch issues a final command to open the gate. After a prolonged moment of consideration, Yoren refuses once again. Lorch proclaims them rebels, regardless of their affliction with the Night's Watch. Yoren informs Lorch that he has some young boys with him, but Lorch declares that they will meet the same fate. He nonchalantly signals and a spear is thrown towards Yoren, killing Wath instead. Lorch orders his men to breach the walls and eliminate everyone, with more spears and torches being thrown their way. Yoren issues a command for them to spread out and hold the walls. Arya ends up next to Hot Pie, who becomes anxious and admits he doesn't know how to fight. Arya reassures him, falsely claiming that it's straightforward, and pushes aside her own fear to scream Winterfell while striking at the first hand that appears on the parapet. After Hot Pie warns her, Arya forces the next climber to retreat from the wall. Following her lead, Hot Pie fends off another attacker. While Sir Amory and his men don't have ladders, they manage to climb the rough walls, resulting in an unending stream of foes. Every foe they defeat is quickly replaced. Arya spots Yoren thrusting his dirk into the knight with the spiked helmet, and witnesses Koss taking down 4 axemen assaulting the gate. She catches sight of the Lannister banner once more and wishes she could confront Joffrey and stab him. Dober wrestles an opponent on the walk, and Lomi bashes the man's head, but Lomi's triumph is short-lived, as he sees Dyber lying lifeless with the enemy's knife in his abdomen. She hears Kyle begging for mercy until a knight with a wasp sigil brutally smashes his face with a spiked mace. The odors of blood, smoke, iron, and urine blend into a nauseating mixture. Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie struggle to overcome a wiry man on the ground. Gendry's sword breaks against the man's helmet, which falls off, revealing an elderly, frightened face. Arya feels pity for the man, even as she and Hot Pie are forced to kill him. Gendry takes the man's sword and leaps down into the yard, searching for more adversaries. Arya notices that more enemies have infiltrated the holdfast and follows Gendry. However, she soon becomes disoriented as death surrounds her from all sides. Suddenly, Yoren shakes her and declares that the battle is lost. He instructs her to gather as many survivors as possible and escape through the tunnel beneath the barn. Just like that, he returns to the fray. Arya grabs Gendry and briefs him on the plan. They call Hot Pie down from the walk and find Lomi with a bleeding calf wound. They also locate Gerren, but his injuries are severe. The crying girl refuses to walk even when slapped, so Arya has to drag her while the others hurry ahead. Upon her arrival at the barn, Arya finds it engulfed in flames. Hot Pie advises her to abandon the crying girl, but Arya remains determined to drag her along. Hot Pie abandons them and hurries back inside the barn, while Gendry returns to lift the girl onto his shoulder. The barn feels like an inferno, with the back wall ablaze and the animals in a state of panic, kicking and making distressing sounds. Inside their wagons, Biter and Rog struggle desperately to free themselves, while Jaqen H'ghra addresses Arya in his friendly tone. The trapdoor leading to the tunnel is just a few feet away, and the fire is spreading rapidly, reminding Arya of the horrifically burnt face of the Hound. Gendry ponders how to get the little girl through the narrow tunnel, and Arya instructs him to push her while inquiring about the whereabouts of the axe. Gendry mentions it's near the haven, but prioritizes rescuing the animals first. Arya tells him to proceed with the girl and heads off to retrieve the axe. Outside, she witnesses Kos being killed immediately after surrendering. Yoren is nowhere in sight, but the axe is where Gendry had left it. As she wrenches the axe free, a mailed hand seizes her arm. Reacting swiftly, she thrusts the axe between the man's legs and then rushes back to the burning barn. With thick smoke billowing out and the animals wailing inside, re-entering the barn proves to be the most challenging thing she has ever done. Within, the roof has caught fire, and fiery debris of wood and straw are falling. The smoke is so dense that she can't see the wagon, so she crawls in the direction of Biter's cries. Upon locating the wagon, she tosses the axe inside and makes a run for the tunnel. Rorge manages to catch the axe and begins attacking the wagon. Arya hears the wagon breaking apart, just as she dives headfirst into the tunnel. She falls 5 feet and gets dirt in her mouth, but she pays it no mind. After crawling only a short distance, she hears the barn collapsing behind her, sending a cloud of scorching smoke and black dust billowing upwards, creating an infernal smell. She holds her breath, kisses the mud on the floor, and then bursts into tears, though she is unsure for whom she is crying. It's a shame this battle was greatly reduced in the show, since it reads pretty interestingly and would have made for a great action scene. However, with the Battle of the Blackwater coming at the end of the season, Dan and Dave probably didn't have the budget to also show the battle in its entirety. However, the book does a better job at using this chapter to introduce Amory Lorch and his way of hunting the Brotherhood without banners by murdering small folk indiscriminately. In Chapter 15, Cersei Lannister is filled with rage upon discovering that Stannis Baratheon is spreading letters accusing her of incest. The small council possesses 2 copies of this proclamation, one delivered to Maester Frankfurt at Castle Stokeworth, and the other received by Lord Giles Roseby. Littlefinger remarks that if Stannis sent letters to them, it's likely that every other lord in the 7 kingdoms has received a copy as well. Cersei insists on burning every copy to prevent her father and Joffrey from learning about them, but Tyrion Lannister points out that copies have probably been dispatched to Harrenhal and Castle Rock, rendering the secret impossible to contain. While Cersei expresses her anger at being accused of incest, adultery, and treason, Tyrion is quietly impressed by her ability to feign outrage, knowing full well that these accusations are entirely accurate. He explains that such claims are to be expected, as Stannis requires a pretext to justify his rebellion. When Cersei adamantly declares that she will not tolerate being labelled a whore, Tyrion privately reflects that Stannis never alleged that Jaime paid her for her affections. Tyrion then scrutinizes the letter further and points out the peculiar phrase, "done in the light of the Lord." Grand Maester Pycelle clarifies that this phrase is commonly used in the Free Cities, and Littlefinger mentions that Varys, who was mysteriously absent, reported years ago that Stannis' wife, Selyse, had become involved with a Red Priest. Tyrion recognizes the potential of this information as a tool for propaganda against Stannis. Cersei once again raises the issue of the accusations and suggests issuing an edict to suppress their spread. Tyrion, however, points out that silencing individuals only shows that you are afraid of what they might say. When Cersei asks for his alternative, Tyrion proposes allowing people to gossip until they lose interest. Without concrete evidence, many will view the letter as Stannis' feeble attempt to justify his rebellion. Littlefinger concurs and suggests countering the accusations by spreading a similar rumor, alleging that Shireen Baratheon is not Stannis' legitimate child, implying that he is a cuckold. Littlefinger goes even further, suggesting that Shireen's fool, Patchface, be implicated as the father to make the story more scandalous. Pycelle objects, stating that Lady Selyse would never engage in such a relationship. But Littlefinger counters that one would have to be a fool to desire Lady Selyse. He adds that the fool's unwavering devotion to Shireen, along with their similarly disfigured, half-frozen appearances, will make the tale more believable. Pycelle protests, mentioning that Shireen was scarred by grayscale, but Littlefinger dismisses the intelligence of the common people. Cersei smiles at Littlefinger's wickedness and thanks him. Tyrion suggests that they not be the ones to spread this rumor, as it could be seen as a self-serving lie. Littlefinger proposes using prostitutes and taverns for this purpose. Tyrion departs, and when Cersei inquires why, he informs her that he is having a special gift made for Joffrey, a unique chain. Cersei retorts that Joffrey possesses many chains and that Tyrion cannot buy his love. Tyrion counters by suggesting that one day, Joffrey may come to treasure this chain above all others. Outside, Bronn informs Tyrion that the blacksmiths he summoned are waiting in his audience chamber. Tyrion playfully praises Bronn for sounding almost like a proper courtier and teases that Bronn might kneel next. Bronn, however, responds with a crude retort. As they head to the Tower of the Hand, Lady Tanda Stokeworth attempts to gain Tyrion's attention, but he ignores her and instead instructs his litter to be prepared. In his audience chamber, Tyrion finds his timid squire, Podrick Payne, arranging his clothing and the Hand's chain of office. Tyrion promptly addresses the assembled smiths, presenting them with 3 links of an enormous chain and instructing them to produce 1,000 more. He orders all the forgers and metalworkers in the city to be put to work, manufacturing and connecting additional links. He appoints Goodman Ironbelly to oversee the task. The smiths inquire about the Queen's demands for armor and weapons, including her threat of crushing hands for failing to meet quotas. Tyrion assures them that no hands will be crushed, envisioning the unfavorable reputation Cersei is fostering for herself among the common people. Ironbelly asks about the availability of iron, and Tyrion promises that Lord Baelish will provide the necessary funds, while the City Watch will assist in collecting and melting down every horseshoe in the city if iron shortages arise. An older smith, Salarine, protests that such work is beneath master armors like himself and offers to craft a formidable suit of plate armor for Tyrion instead. Tyrion retorts that they can either make chains or wear them, and then departs from the chamber. Bronn waits outside with a litter and an escort from the Blackears. While on his journey, Tyrion contemplates his recent actions, including the decision to have hundreds of carpenters construct fishing boats instead of catapults, allowing hunters into the Kingswood, and even sending the Gold Cloaks to gather food to alleviate the city's hunger. However, despite his efforts, people continue to cast accusing glances at him. He also reflects on how Cersei failed to grasp the significance of Stannis declaring himself as king, and ponders how Renly Baratheon will respond to this development. Looking out at the streets, Tyrion wonders who the informers in the crowds might be, and surmises that they are likely the ones who appear the most innocent. His destination is a 2-story brothel, located behind Rhaenys Hill. Upon entering, he is welcomed by a tall woman with dark skin, who introduces herself as Chataya. When Tyrion expresses his desire to see the available girls, Chataya recommends a 16-year-old girl with dark skin, who turns out to be her daughter, Alea. In the Summer Isles, being a prostitute is considered an honorable profession and a way to please the gods. Tyrion wonders about the connection between prostitution and the gods, and playfully mentions that he would become more religious if he could pray with his genitals. Alea leads Tyrion to an upstairs turret room, revealing a hidden panel in a wardrobe that leads to an underground tunnel where Varys waits in disguise. Tyrion questions Alea's trustworthiness, and Varys explains she's not loyal to the Queen and is glad to be rid of Al-Ardim. Varys reveals the tunnel was originally built for a discreet hand of the king. In a stable, Varys helps Tyrion disguise himself as a child and provides a horse. Tyrion shares Stannis' accusation of Jaime and Cersei's incest and asks how Stannis learned of it. Varys suggests it could be whispered information or observation, like Jon Arryn and Eddard Stark investigating King Robert's bastard's hair color. Tyrion suspects Littlefinger as the source, but Varys doesn't confirm. Before leaving, Tyrion tells Varys that they're either best friends or worst enemies, and Varys echoes the sentiment. It's actually quite sweet in this chapter how Pycelle tries to prevent the spreading of rumors to harm a 10-year-old girl already inflicted with grayscale. Most of this chapter is probably meant to be off-screen in the show. However, that secret tunnel built by a previous Hand of the King is almost certainly Tywin Lannister, as described by Alt-Shift-X in his video, The Real Tyrion Lannister. In Chapter 16, Bran wakes up long before dawn, and Winterfell is bustling with guests gathered for the harvest feast. He has the role of playing the prince, though he had always aspired to be a knight rather than a prince. However, now his days are spent listening to elderly men discuss matters he can barely comprehend. Lord Wyman Manderley arrived from White Harbour 2 days ago, and Bran welcomed him while seated in his father's high seat. Afterward, Sir Roderick Castle commended him for his performance, but Bran knows that Manderley is just the first of many lords who will use the feast as an excuse to discuss their concerns with their liege lord. Hodor comes to help Bran get dressed. Although Bran prefers dressing himself, some tasks are completed more quickly with assistance. Bran is amazed by Hodor's dexterity and strength, and comments that Hodor could have been a great knight if he had not been deprived of his wits. With Bran settled in his basket, he instructs Hodor to carry him downstairs. In the courtyard, Bran observes the Walders participating in jousting against Quintains. He notices that Little Walder strikes harder, but Big Walder handles his horse better. Upon seeing Bran on Hodor's back, Little Walder makes a derogatory comment about Hodor, which angers Bran. The Walders continue to insult Hodor, and Little Walder starts bumping into him with his horse. Bran becomes increasingly furious and threatens to set Summer, his direwolf, on them. However, Little Walder points out that he is wearing armor and expresses his desire for a wolfskin cloak. Maester Luwin intervenes to resolve the argument and scolds the Walders. While Big Walder appears remorseful, Little Walder remains arrogant. Luwin reminds them of the duty of noble lords to protect the vulnerable and warns them to stay away from the Godswood. He then calls Bran to join him in meeting Lord Wyman. The Maester commends Bran for defending Hodor and acknowledges that it shouldn't have been necessary to fetch him for the meeting with Lord Wyman. Bran apologizes and asks if they will discuss the war. However, Maester Luwin reminds Bran sharply that he is only 8 years old and should remain quiet unless directly addressed. Inside, Bran is seated in his father's chair, with Maester Luwin and Sir Roderick flanking him. Lord Wyman Manderley, who is severely overweight, is quite friendly and insists that no prince is ever late. He discusses the advantages of White Harbour for minting currency and constructing a fleet to support Robb's new kingdom. The mention of warships excites Bran, but no one seeks his opinion. The meeting continues into lunch, during which Lord Wyman inquires about his widowed cousin, Lady Donella Hornwood, who lost her husband and only son in battles on the Green Fork and in the Whispering Wood. He suggests the possibility of marrying her himself or arranging a union between her and his son, Sir Wendell. Later, Lord Wyman shares that Tywin Lannister has proposed ransoming his son, Sir Willis, who was captured during the Battle of the Green Fork. In exchange for his release, Tywin wants Lord Wyman to withdraw his support for King Robb. Lord Wyman, however, has declined Tywin's offer and hopes for a fair prisoner exchange to take place soon. Lady Hornwood arrives during supper, and Bran offers his condolences to the grieving widow. She expresses her gratitude but requests permission to retire for the night and continue their discussion the next day. The following morning's conversation centers on preparations for the upcoming winter. However, Lord Hornwood raises an alarming concern. Roose Bolton's illegitimate son, Ramsay Snow, is amassing forces at the Dreadfort, and she is unsure of his intentions. When Sir Roderick admits he is unfamiliar with Ramsay, Lady Hornwood explains that Ramsay lived with his mother until Doric Bolton's death left Roose without an heir. She mentions Ramsay's equally cruel companion, Reek, who was notorious for never bathing. There are disturbing rumors about their hunting habits and other unsavory deeds, which are difficult to believe even when attributed to a house like Bolton. Lady Hornwood fears that Ramsay may covet her lands now that her husband and son have passed away. Bran is eager to provide her with 100 men for protection, but Sir Roderick assures her that they will safeguard her lands. He suggests that in the future, it may be wiser for her to consider remarriage. Lady Hornwood acknowledges that she is beyond childbearing age and receives more suitors than ever. She is willing to marry if ordered to do so, but she hasn't found anyone to her liking. In a playful manner, she hints at an interest in Sir Roderick himself. After Lady Hornwood departs, Maester Luwin points out her subtle hint, which makes Sir Roderick uncomfortable. Bran notices that she seems sad, so Roderick adds that she is also gentle and not unattractive, but remains a potential threat to the realm. Bran is surprised by this, but Maester Luwin explains that without a direct heir, there will be numerous claims to her lands that Robb, as the liege lord, must resolve. When Bran suggests Sir Roderick as a solution, the elderly Castellan dismisses the idea, stating he is only a knight and too old. The problem would resurface upon his death. Considering other options, Bran suggests Lord Hornwood's 12-year-old illegitimate son, Larrent Snow. Sir Roderick is skeptical about Lady Hornwood's acceptance of this proposal, but Maester Luwin insists they should consider it. Bran requests permission to leave the meeting, and Sir Roderick grants it, complimenting Bran on his conduct. With a few hours of daylight left, Bran heads to the Godswood to visit his direwolf, Summer. Hodor accompanies him to his favourite spot near the pool next to the heart tree. Suddenly, Osha, completely naked, bursts out of the cold pool, surprising everyone present. When Bran inquires about the frigid water, Osha mentions that she enjoys it. She notices Bran's curiosity and asks if he has never seen a naked woman before. Bran recalls bathing with his sisters and witnessing serving women bathing, but Osha's body is rugged and adorned with scars, most of which she earned while fighting men, including members of the Night's Watch. She even mentions killing one of them. Osha then brings up overhearing the Walders mocking Hodor. Bran recalls that Hodor never engages in fights and is considered gentle by Septon Chael. Osha responds by saying that Little Walder's name suits him well, big on the outside but small on the inside, and thoroughly mean-spirited. She also inquires if Bran has experienced any more wolf dreams. When he answers negatively, Osha remarks that a prince should be better at lying and asks for permission to leave before quickly making her way back to the kitchens. That night, Bran has a dream in which a weirwood tree beckons to him, and a three-eyed crow pecks at his face. He awakens to the commotion caused by the arrival of the Umbers from beyond the last river. The following day, Bran welcomes their leaders, who happens to be two of Great Jon Umber's uncles, Morris Umber, known as Crowfood, due to losing an eye to a crow that mistakenly thought him dead, and Hother Umber, known as Horsebane, for reasons that remain undisclosed. Mors immediately expresses his desire to marry Lady Hornwood. Maester Luwin and Sir Roderick explain that she is currently grieving, but promise to consider the proposal. Hother, on the other hand, requests Longship to counter wildling raidings across the Bay of Seals. Sir Roderick suggests that Hother should collaborate with Lord Manderley to provide timber, in return for which they will receive shipwrights and sailors. During the audience, the steward of Deepwood Moat arrives and conveys Lady Sybil Glover's apologies for her absence, as she is occupied with her young children. Bran soon realizes that the steward effectively governs while Lord Galbert Glover and his brother Robert Glover are away at war. After discussing the harvest, Sir Roderick inquires about Larrent Snow, and Maester Luwin commends Bran's idea of making the bastard the heir to Hornwood, saying he would make a fine lord for Winterfell in the future. Bran objects, pointing out that Robb's sons with his Frey wife will inherit instead of him. However, Sir Roderick reminds him that nothing in life is guaranteed. He himself has only one daughter, Beth, despite 3 marriages, and his brother Martin Castle's lineage ended with his son, Jory, despite having 4 sons. The following day, Leopold Talhart from Torrance Square, who had arrived the previous day, has his audience with Bran. He brings news that his nephew Benfred Talhart is gathering a group of young lancers who all see themselves as young wolves, referring to themselves as the Wild Hares. Bran remembers Benfred visiting Winterfell and getting along well with Robb and Theon Greyjoy. However, Sir Roderick is clearly displeased and orders that Benfred must stay at Torrance Square as instructed. Leopold then suggests sending his younger son, Beren, to be fostered with Lady Hornwood, and even considers having him take the Hornwood name if named as an heir. Bran gives the expected response, promising to discuss the matter with Robb and Lady Hornwood. After the meeting, Maester Luwin expresses his approval of the idea, but Sir Roderick believes it would be challenging for a young boy to manage the lands. Luwin acknowledges that with the Riverlands now part of the kingdom, it might be best to arrange a marriage for her with one of the lords from the Trident. Over the following days, they receive regretful responses from other houses. Ramsay Snow, the bastard, won't be joining them. The Mormonts and the Karstarks have headed south. Lord Andrew Locke is too old, Lady Lyessa Flint is heavily pregnant, and there's illness in Widow's Watch. This leaves only Lord Howland Reed, who hasn't left his swamps in 16 years, and House Serwyn. However, Lord Medgar Serwyn is a captive of the Lannisters. Then, on a windy day, 14-year-old Clay Kerwin arrives at Winterfell with a dozen lancers while Bran is riding his horse, Dancer, in the yard. Clay has always been a friend to Bran and his brothers, and he immediately inquires if Stannis Baratheon has informed Winterfell about Joffrey Baratheon being of questionable legitimacy. Bran suddenly feels immense pressure on his chest. When Clay asks if he's alright, Bran asserts that Robb will defeat Stannis as well. That night, he doesn't experience the dreamless sleep he had hoped for. In his dream, the three-eyed crow pecks at his eyes and urges him to fly. Then the crow pecks his forehead until it breaks through his skull, and suddenly, Bran can see again. He finds himself climbing a tower, slipping. He calls for help, and a golden man appearing above him saying, "The things I do for love," before throwing him out into the empty air. So, the Harvest Feast is pretty much completely cut from the show. However, in the books, it does foreshadow Wyman Manderley secretly conspiring with Morse and Hother Umber against Roose Bolton to aid Stannis Baratheon in his march on Winterfell, since they were assigned to work together here in Book 2. Our first mention of Ramsay is here, and the prize Lady Hornwood lands. This chapter shows Little Walder to be a bit of a thug, and Big Walder as the more intelligent and amicable of the two. Also, Leopold Tallheart and his young wolves are in for a rude awakening when Theon and Dagmere attack Torrhen Square. In Chapter 17, while having breakfast, Tyrion requests Grand Maester Pycelle to dismiss his serving girl and entrust him with 2 sealed copies of a confidential letter meant for Prince Doran Martell. He emphasizes the urgency of sending the message using the fastest ravens available. Tyrion understands that breakfast can wait, but the situation in the realm is pressing, with Lord Renly Baratheon advancing along the Rose Road and uncertainty about when Lord Stannis Baratheon will set sail from Dragonstone. Pycelle, though slow in his movements, eventually complies with Tyrion's request. Tyrion takes note of Pycelle's ornate maester's chain, which is more elaborate than the standard one. Tyrion had ample time to make progress with his breakfast before witnessing a single raven taking flight. During this period, he took a moment to inspect the well-organized collection of potions maintained by Pycelle, and he discreetly appropriated a small bottle from the high shelf. When Pycelle returned, inquiring about the message, Tyrion insisted on maintaining its secrecy. He dissuaded Pycelle from involving the small council, asserting that their role was to advise the 13-year-old King Joffrey. In response to the inquiries about the Queen, Tyrion reasoned that Cersei already bore considerable burdens, and Pycelle reluctantly concurred, considering her gender's supposed fragility. Tyrion pondered what Eddard Stark would think of such a description, but chose to remain silent. He requested that he be discreetly informed when a reply arrived from Dorne, all the while counting to himself 1. Descending to the lower bailey, Tyrion discovered Bronn, now clad in armor suitable for his position as captain of the Hands Guard, observing the practice of men-at-arms. Tyrion humorously remarked that Bronn was ignoring 2 attractive serving girls. Bronn retorted that he could easily obtain sexual services, but emphasized the importance of vigilance, which could save his life. Bronn pointed out the prowess of a hedge knight named Sir Talad, but noted that he had fallen into a predictable rhythm that would lead to his downfall when facing Bronn. While crossing the bailey, Bronn informed Tyrion that 30 supplicants awaited him, including Lady Tanda Stokeworth's page bearing an invitation to supper. Lady Tanda hoped to arrange a match between Tyrion and her dim-witted daughter, Lollies, and Tyrion instructed Bronn to decline the invitation. Additionally, a Braavosi moneylender sought repayment of a loan, and Tyrion directed him to Littlefinger, who would handle the matter. Another supplicant, a minor lord from the Trident, sought compensation for damages to his land. Recognizing the value of having a cooperative river lord, Tyrion promised to meet with him the following day, ensuring he received good accommodations, a meal, and new boots courtesy of King Joffrey. Several food merchants also sought protection from the starving mobs, who had recently killed a baker for overcharging. Tyrion suggested the use of gold cloaks, but given that there were gold cloaks among the rioters, the merchants demanded an audience with the king. Tyrion dismissed their hopes as foolish, as Joffrey would likely respond with punishment. Bronn added that Sir Alliser Thorne of the Night's Watch had arrived with a rotting hand, prompting Tyrion to express his disdain for the man and order him to be confined to a grimy cell left waiting. Following Bronn's departure to carry out his assigned task, Tyrion encounters Cersei and her entourage near the main gate. When he inquires about her destination, Cersei claims she is going to inspect the defenses due to Renly's advance from Highgarden. She believes Renly could arrive by the full moon, but Tyrion reassures her that Renly's slow progress, marked by feasting and holding court at various castles along the way, suggests otherwise. Tyrion doubts the credibility of Renly's rumored 100,000-strong army, but Cersei counters that Renly commands the combined forces of Storm's End and Highgarden, with House Redwyne being the sole holdout thanks to her capture of the Redwyne twins, Horace and Hobur. Tyrion jests that it's a pity she left Sir Loras Tyrell escape, and points out that Renly faces challenges with Robb Stark at Riverrun and Tywin Lannister at Harrenhal. He suggests that Renly's current strategy, characterized by slow progression and a display of power, is prudent. If Robb defeats Tywin, the South will fall into Renly's hands, and if Tywin triumphs, Renly can strike a weakened Lannister force. Cersei implores Tyrion to convince their father to bring his army to King's Landing, but Tyrion acknowledges his inability to sway Lord Tywin. Unperturbed, Cersei inquires about Tyrion's efforts to free Jaime, asserting that Jaime's value far exceeds Tyrion's worth. Tyrion humorously retorts that they don't have 100 versions of him to trade to Catelyn Stark. Angrily, Cersei deems him worse than useless and departs. In truth, Tyrion is more apprehensive about Stannis than Renly. While Renly may be popular but unexperienced in war, Stannis is unwavering, tough, and unyielding. Spies sent to Dragonstone have provided no information, and there have been sightings of Lyseni war galleys, along with reports of sail captains aligning with Dragonstone. Tyrion fears that if Stannis and Renly launch a joint attack by sea and land, there will be little hope for Joffrey or himself. Podrick Payne greets him at the door of his solar, and with shyness informs him that Peter Baelish is inside. Tyrion discovers Littlefinger seated by the window, observing Joffrey's unsuccessful attempts to kill hares with his new crossbow in the yard below. Littlefinger humorously remarks that the hares appear to be winning and advises Pod to invest in pots, anticipating that the castle will soon be overrun with hares, resulting in potted hare being served for every meal. Tyrion dismisses Pod and offers Littlefinger refreshments, which Littlefinger politely declines, citing rumors that drinking with Tyrion might lead to being sent to the wall. Tyrion admires Littlefinger's attire and takes notice of his Valyrian steel dagger with a dragonbone hilt. Littlefinger playfully offers it to Tyrion as a gift, knowing that Tyrion mentioned the dagger earlier. This gesture infuriates Tyrion, as he believes Littlefinger is taunting him, thinking that Tyrion is incapable of challenging him. Tyrion reflects on Littlefinger's ability to protect himself, likening him to a man truly armored in gold. Littlefinger started with a minor customs position given to him by Jon Arryn 10 years ago, where he significantly increased revenue. He quickly rose to become the master of coin, overseeing a substantial growth in the crown's income. However, this also resulted in significant debts. But Littlefinger's financial acumen allowed him to make shrewd investments in various ventures, multiplying the wealth of the crown. He strategically placed his own people in key positions within the government, controlling various aspects of finances and administration. Most of them were not highborn, but they proved more capable than the noble class they replaced. These appointments went unchallenged because Littlefinger was perceived as harmless due to his lack of military power, land holdings, or marriage prospects, leaving Tyrion uncertain about how to confront him. Tyrion then inquires about Littlefinger's relationship with the Tully children during his fosterage at Riverrun. Littlefinger boasts of taking the virginity of both girls, an assertion Tyrion considers a clever fabrication. Tyrion explains that he would have difficulty convincing Catelyn and Lysa to cooperate, but they might trust Littlefinger. He hints at offering Lysa the identity of Jon Arryn's true killer to gain her allegiance. Littlefinger expresses interest in knowing the murderer's identity, but Tyrion implies that Lysa must first align with the Lannisters before receiving such information. Littlefinger notes Lysa's troubles with the Vale Mountain clans, who have become more aggressive and better armed under Tyrion's influence. Tyrion assures Littlefinger that Lysa's power would be directed against Renly or Stannis, not the Starks or Tullys. In exchange, Tyrion offers to ensure peace, deliver justice, name Lysa's son Warden of the East, and arrange a marriage between Princess Marcilla and Lord Robert Arryn. Littlefinger inquires about Cersei's opinion regarding the plan, and he chuckles when Tyrion responds with a nonchalant shrug. Littlefinger then asks about his reward, and Tyrion offers him Harrenhal and the dominant position as Lord over the Riverlands, serving as their liege lord. Tyrion finds amusement in Littlefinger's reaction because, by birth, he only owns a small piece of land on the Fingers, while Harrenhal is one of the wealthiest domains in the realm. Littlefinger is initially cautious, considering that Janos Slynt was also granted Harrenhal for his services. However, Tyrion reassures him that he is far more valuable than Slynt. Satisfied with the answer, Littlefinger mentions that he may need to bed Lysa once again to secure her agreement and requests a fortnight to prepare for the endeavor. As Littlefinger departs, Tyrion privately reflects, too. Tyrion retreats to his bedchamber and waits for Varys, expecting a longer delay. Surprisingly, Varys arrives an hour later. Tyrion teases Varys about his own cruelty for taunting Pycelle with a secret, but Varys implies that he may already know Tyrion's secret through his little birds. Tyrion acknowledges that he aims to discourage Dorne from aligning with any faction, despite Prince Doran's well-known disdain for House Lannister. Varys suggests that Doran, a sentimental man, still mourns his sister Elya's death. Tyrion discloses that he has offered Doran a seat on the council and the opportunity to exact revenge on his sister's murderer. Varys brings up the fact that Sir Gregor Clegane, known to have killed Elya, is a Lannister bannerman. Tyrion argues that Lord Tywin would likely agree to sacrifice Gregor Clegane for the sake of 50,000 Dornishmen. When Varys speculates about Doran's potential demand for the blood of the one who commanded the act, Tyrion shifts the blame to Robert Baratheon, claiming it was his rebellion. Varys, however, notes that Robert was not in King's Landing at the time, and Tyrion counters that neither was Doran Martell. Varys predicts that Doran will require a gesture of goodwill and inquires about Tyrion's choice. Tyrion, in turn, presses Varys to make the decision. Varys suggests Tommen, as Tyrion cannot offer Myrcella to both Doran Martell and Lysa Arryn. Tyrion finds Varys' knowledge uncanny and accuses him of cheating at guessing games. Varys praises Tommen and hints at a concern that Tyrion might be planning to make Tommen king. Tyrion clarifies that Joffrey is the king, but Varys points out that Cersei will resist parting with both Tommen and Marcilla. Tyrion decides to keep Cersei in the dark and vows to consider anyone who might betray his secret as a mortal enemy. When Varys giggles at his statement, Tyrion mentally counts it as the third time Varys has laughed at him. So, in this chapter, for a brief moment, Littlefinger gives away a glaring hint that he was the one who murdered Jon Arryn when Tyrion says, "If I gave her Jon Arryn's true killer, she might think more kindly of me." That made Littlefinger sit up. True killer? It's not much, but for a moment, Peter Baelish loses his composure and thinks Tyrion figured out the truth. Also, again in this chapter, Tyrion says he can't do anything to Littlefinger, which he can, and is a massive plot hole on George R.R. Martin's part, because after the incident with the dagger, Tyrion should have thrown Littlefinger into the Black Cells and replaced him with someone he trusts. The TV show also had it to be Theon Greyjoy he was promising Marcella to for comedic effect, whereas in the books, that's just not believable, and sending Dommen to Dorne makes more sense. In Chapter 18, Sansa discovered an anonymous message beneath her pillow instructing her to go to the Godswood that night if she desires to return home. She repeatedly reads the note, perplexed by its meaning. Despite her fervent prayers for a noble knight to rescue her, she suspects it might be one of Joffrey's cruel pranks or a clever trap to expose her disloyalty. She dreads the possibility of encountering Sir Ilyn Payne with his sword, Ice. When her bedmaid unexpectedly enters to inquire about a bath, Sansa hastily conceals a note, worried that the girl may have seen it. She promptly requests a fire to be lit and dismisses the girl, sensing a hidden agenda in her gaze. Her household staff is rotated every 2 weeks to prevent her from forming close bonds, and Sansa believes they all spy on her. Once alone, she burns the note, observing Sir Preston Greenfield patrolling the Maegor's Holdfast drawbridge from her window. Sansa enjoys freedom within the Red Keep, but anticipates his questions regarding her nighttime activities. Unable to come up with a convincing lie, she opts to stay in bed, yet her thoughts keep her awake. She yearns for someone to provide guidance, missing the presence of Septa Mordane, her dear friend Jean Poole, and even her sister Arya, whom she assumes is back in Winterfell by now. Upon hearing commotion outside, Sansa peers out and witnesses armed men rushing to the wall, while Sir Preston disappears from his post on the drawbridge. Puzzled by her own actions, Sansa quickly dresses and conceals a meat knife beneath her cloak. After crossing the unguarded drawbridge, she passes men preparing for battle in the courtyard, and spots 3 members of the Kingsguard assisting Joffrey with his armor. Fortunately, Joffrey is preoccupied with retrieving his weapons and remains unaware of her presence. Sansa rushes towards the Godswood, the distant sounds fading behind her, her fear of Joffrey preventing her from looking back. The Godswood, even within the bustling city, possesses a tranquil, untamed aura, and Sansa senses the presence of the ancient gods watching over her. She has always preferred her mother's gods, with their ornate artwork, fragrant incense, vibrant rainbows, and opulent fabrics and gems. Nevertheless, there's an undeniable mystique to the Godswood, especially at night. Worried that she might be too late, Sansa is startled by the voice of Dontos Hollard, who expresses his concerns that she wouldn't show up. As Dontos reaches out to her, Sansa instinctively recoils, her hand seeking her knife. Dontos assures her that he merely wishes to assist her as she helped him. Skeptical, Sansa inquires whether he is intoxicated, and Dontos admits to having consumed some wine to bolster his courage. Brandishing her knife, Sansa demands to know who sent him. Dontos swears on his honor as a knight that he came on his own, but Sansa recollects Joffrey's decree and retorts that she prayed for a knight to rescue her, not a drunken old man. Dontos accepts her rebuke and hopes to rediscover his knighthood because of her, asserting that Sansa saved him not only from Joffrey, but also from his own self-destructive tendencies. Dontos draws a parallel with the legendary figure Florian, who was both a fool and the greatest knight of all. He kneels before Sansa, asking to be her Florian. Still cautious, Sansa inquires about his plan for her escape. Dontos explains that the most challenging part will be getting her out of the castle, after which a ship could take her home. However, he needs time to secure the necessary funds and make arrangements discreetly, as he is under surveillance. When Sansa sheathes her knife, Dontos stands up and expresses his remorse for not having saved her father. He admits he is not a hero like Ryman Redwyn or Barristan Selmy, having won no glory in battles or tournaments. But Sansa has rekindled his understanding of knighthood. He pledges his loyalty to her and invokes the old gods, promising to send her home. Convinced by his solemn vow, Sansa agrees to entrust herself to him. She inquires if he will send another message to inform her when the time is right, but Dontos deems it too risky. Instead, he advises her to visit the Godswood as frequently as possible, since it is the only safe location. Sansa agrees, pledging to be courageous, resilient, and patient above all. Dontos encourages her to depart, and Sansa tenderly kisses him on the cheek, addressing him as "my Florian," convinced that her prayer has reached the gods. As Sansa joyfully contemplates returning home and recalling tales of Florian and Jonquil, she collides with Sandor Clegane while walking. The Hound catches her before they both tumble, and inquires if she intends to bring about their demise on the Serpentine steps. Curious about her late-night presence, he questions Sansa, who stammers that she was praying for her father and the king. The Hound, not buying her explanation, asserts that he's not intoxicated enough to believe that, mocking her as a little bird, still singing the songs she was taught. He playfully asks her to sing a song about knights and fair maidens, and questions her affinity for knights. Sansa responds that she likes true knights, but the Hound ridicules her, reminding her that he is not a knight at all. Reeling and nearly stumbling, the Hound curses his excessive wine consumption, then offers to escort Sansa back to her chambers. He gently pushes her and follows her down the steps. Upon their return, they encounter Sir Boros Blount guarding the drawbridge. Sansa recoils, but the Hound assures her that there's nothing to fear from Blount. When Sir Boros questions why she isn't in her chambers, Sansa's false explanation about visiting the Godswood seems more convincing this time. The Hound adds that it would be difficult for her to sleep amidst all the noise. Sir Boros mentions that preparations for Tyrek Lannister's wedding feast have prompted some troublemakers to indulge in feasting as well. He notes that Joffrey led an expedition that scattered the troublemakers. Clegane comments, "A brave boy," but Sansa wonders how brave Joffrey will be when facing her brother, Robb. After crossing the drawbridge, Sansa asks why the Hound allows people to call him a dog but never a knight. He responds that he prefers dogs and shares a family anecdote about his grandfather, a kennel master at Castle Rock who earned lands and a tower house for saving Lord Tytos Lannister from a lion, sacrificing a leg and 3 dogs in the process. He adds that a dog will sacrifice itself for you and never deceive you, something little birds cannot do. When he mentions that he never got his own song, Sansa suggests a song about Florian and Jonquil. The Hound dismisses it as a song about a fool and his lover, but insists that he'll have a song from her one day, whether she wants to or not. Sansa replies that she will gladly sing for him, but Clegane retorts, "Pretty thing, and such a bad liar. A dog can smell a lie, you know. Look around you and take a good whiff. They're all liars here, and every one better than you." This line was given to Littlefinger in the show. What is so cool about this chapter is that it makes sense why Dontis Hollard would contact Sansa now, which is the offer Tyrion just made to Littlefinger to give him Harrenhal if he can secure an alliance with Lysa, which he can. So, Littlefinger was probably planning to leave for the Vale like he does in A Storm of Swords, and after leaving would have arranged to have Sansa be whisked away from King's Landing before Renly or Stannis' attack and brought to him by ship. In Chapter 19, perched high in a tree, Arya surveys a fishing village in the distance, noticing some chimneys emanating smoke. It is the first sign of life they've encountered since leaving the Holdfast, as the Lannisters have either destroyed or killed everything in their path. The houses seem inviting, offering the promise of warmth and shelter, unless Sir Amry Lorch and his men are present. Arya keeps a watchful eye on the village for an extended period, attempting to confirm its safety, but the distance makes it difficult to be certain. Arya and the others decide to return to the charred village on the following night. Hot Pie and Lomi remain fearful, but Lorch and his men are long gone. The Holdfast is a grim sight, strewn with corpses from both sides, picked over by scavengers. Gendry is quick to avert his gaze, but Arya is determined to locate Yoren, clinging to the belief that he cannot be dead. They eventually find Yoren's lifeless body alongside 4 Lannister men-at-arms, and Arya wonders how many men it took to bring down the Black Brother. With too many bodies to bury everyone, Arya insists on giving Yoren a proper grave. As they dig, conflicting emotions surge within her. Part of her wants to cry, while another part wants to vent her frustration on Yoren. The sole survivors, aside from Arya, are Cutjack, Kurz, and Taba, who had been on lookout duty in the tower house. They also faced an attack, but the stone tower was fire-resistant and inaccessible with the ladder pulled up, so Lorch's men left them be. When Kurz decided they should continue heading north, Arya clung to the hope of reaching Winterfell, but Kurz was struck by an arrow in the shoulder while pulling up the tower house ladder. Despite Taba's attempts to treat the wound with mud and moss, it became infected and proved fatal. Shortly thereafter, Taba and Cutjack appropriated the weapons and hunting horn of a deceased poacher before abandoning them. Subsequently, Arya and her companions chose to travel along the muddy shores of the God's Eye, taking turns carrying Lomi on a makeshift litter, as his calf wound had deteriorated to the point where he could no longer walk. Arya, perched in her tree, observes a multitude of crows circling above the village, while 3 black swans gracefully glide over the water near the shore, seemingly indifferent to the ongoing war. A part of Arya yearns to be as carefree as those swans, but another part hungers for their meat. For the most part, she and her companions have been subsisting on a distasteful acorn paste that Kurz taught them to make, although Arya and the girl they now call Weasel have resorted to eating insects and worms. Arya even attempted to catch fish with her bare hands, emulating Kos, but without success. Beneath Arya's tree, Hot Pie mimics a dog's bark as a signal, a trick he learnt from Kurz. Agile as a water dancer, Arya descends to the ground to share her observations. Hot Pie suggests going to the village and requesting food, convinced that they won't be harmed if they surrender. Gendry rebukes him for sounding like Lomi, who has been obsessed with the idea since their escape from the Holdfast. Both Lomi and Hot Pie argue that Lorch would have left them unharmed if Yoren had surrendered, but Gendry points out that knights and nobles only take each other captive and disregard the common folk. Hot Pie and Lomi begin discussing the prospect of finding dead fish, cooking crows, and even hunting boars. Although Arya knows the latter is impossible without boar spears, horses, and additional manpower. Gendry then suggests that he should scout the village and steal food for them. Arya argues that she should go instead because she is more adept at stealth, but Gendry agrees to let her accompany him. Hot Pie and Lomi express concerns about being left behind for wolves, and Lomi complains about needing a portion for his injured leg. Gendry reassures them that Lomi has a spear for protection and promises to bring back any leg medicine they come across. He then dons his bull helm and departs. During their walk, Gendry suddenly confides that he believes Lomi is going to die. Arya isn't surprised, having felt the warmth of Lomi's skin and smelled the infection on his leg. She suggests finding a maester, but Gendry dismisses the idea as impossible. He proposes leaving Lomi behind, reasoning that Lomi would do the same, and he's weary of Lomi's talk of surrender. He adds that Arya is the only one who is truly capable, even if she is a girl. Panicking, Arya vehemently denies being a girl, but Gendry insists he's not foolish and challenges her to prove it by revealing her genitals. Desperate to change the topic, Arya brings up the gold cloaks they encountered at the inn and hints that Gendry is also concealing something. Gendry denies knowing why they were after him and turns the question back on Arya, asking why she believes they were targeting her. Realizing that her charade is over, Arya faces a critical decision. She must either kill Gendry or trust him. After emphasizing the need for secrecy and insisting that Lomi and Hot Pie cannot learn the truth, Arya confesses that she is Arya of House Stark. Gendry is utterly shocked by the revelation that Arya is a highborn lady, leaving him unsure of how to act around her. He starts addressing her as my lady and apologizes for discussing inappropriate topics and urinating in front of her. Uncertain whether he's mocking her, Arya commands him to stop, as even Hot Pie would notice if he starts using that title. When Gendry responds by calling her milady once more, Arya playfully crashes into his chest, causing him to fall and laugh. She follows it up with a playful kick to his side, making him laugh even harder, and then sets off toward the village, with Gendry hurrying after her. Approaching the village, an unpleasant odor of decaying flesh permeates the air. Gendry decides to take a detour to the west, while Arya continues her advance along the shore. She moves stealthily, traversing from one bush to another, pausing every few steps to listen intently. The stench intensifies as she draws nearer, and she begins to discern the sounds of horses and men. Eventually, Arya squeezes through a gap in a thorny thicket on the village's outskirts, where she stumbles upon a lengthy gibbet filled with bodies so badly decomposed that they scarcely resemble human beings. Arya forces herself to inspect each corpse one by one, convincing herself that she's as tough as stone. Beyond the gibbet, she spots two spearmen guarding the entrances to a slate-roofed warehouse near the water. Although she can't quite make out the identity of the two lifeless banners nearby, she is certain that the deceased men signify Lannister forces. Two guards turn their attention to a shout from a third man who forcibly pushes along a captive that Arya recognizes as Gendry, identifiable by his bull-shaped helm. One of the guards seizes Gendry's helm, and after subjecting him to some rough treatment, they thrust him through the imposing doors of the storage building. From inside, Arya hears sobbing and a piercing scream of agony. Subsequently, the wind stirs the banners, revealing the Lannister lion and three black dogs on a yellow background, a sigil that she feels she ought to recall. Arya remains vigilant for hours, observing the armored men coming and going, the preparations for dinner, and the onset of night. However, she fails to identify an opportunity to free Gendry. Late at night, she returns to her companions and insists that Hot Pie assist her in rescuing Gendry. Hot Pie argues that they can't take on 20 soldiers, but Arya counters that they only need to deal with the 2 guards at the storage building. Lomi suggests they should surrender, or simply leave Gendry behind, but Arya reminds them that they require his help to transport Lomi. When Arya maintains her determination to make an attempt, Hot Pie reluctantly agrees to join her. As they crawl beneath the gibbet, a crow lands on Hot Pie's back, prompting the guards to hear his gasp. Hot Pie abruptly stands up and declares his surrender. By the time Arya springs up and draws needle, they find themselves surrounded. She makes a slash at the closest man, but he deflects her with a steel-clad arm, and another individual knocks her to the ground. A third man wrenches needle from her grip and strikes her with an armored fist when she attempts to bite him. Dazed and humiliated, Arya lies there in pain and disheartened by the loss of needle, a precious gift from Jon Snow, and the weapon she was taught to wield by Syrio Forel. Arya is forcibly brought to her knees, facing an enormous man, and a sudden recollection hits her. The banner bearing 3 dogs was the sigil of the Hound's brother, Sir Gregor Clegane, also known as the Mountain That Rides, who surpasses even Hodor in size. During the Hand's tourney, Sansa had informed Arya about this. As Hot Pie continues to yield and provides information about Lomi and Weasel, Sir Gregor instructs them to lead his men there and departs. As they make their way back to where Lomi and Weasel are concealed, Hot Pie offers to prepare pies and tarts for the 4 soldiers in exchange for their safety. Upon their arrival, Lomi promptly surrenders and explains that Weasel fled upon hearing their approach. The soldiers inquire about the whereabouts of Beric Dondarrion, but Lomi is unfamiliar with the name. One of the guards dismisses it as a futile effort, believing that Arya's group knows no more than the villagers do. A spearman approaches Lomi and inquires if he can walk. When Lomi responds that he needs to be carried, the spearman casually retorts with, "Think so?" and impales Lomi's throat with his spear. So, in this chapter, unlike the show, Yoren's group isn't attacked because Armory Lorch is looking for Gendry by way of a bull's helm. But instead, they are the Mountain's men and have been tasked by Tywin Lannister to ravage the Riverlands and to use the excuse of looking for Beric Dondarrion to terrorize the Smallfolk. The show also gives us the best approximation of how Yoren died, which was by killing as many Lannister men as he could before falling. In Chapter 20, Tyrion is pleased that he followed the advice to dress warmly, even though he feels like he's wrapped up in a bulky stripped fur due to his shadow skin cloak. Deep below Rhaenys Hill, the cold in the damp chambers behind the Guildhall of the Alchemists is so bone-chilling that even Timett withdrew quickly after a brief exposure. Using the dim light of a sealed lamp, Tyrion examines a delicate, grapefruit-shaped clay jar. The jar has a textured surface to provide a better grip, and when Tyrion tilts it to peer inside, the murky green wildfire slowly moves towards the rim. When Tyrion comments on its thickness, the pale and servile pyromancer Helene explains that the substance, as the pyromancers refer to it, becomes more fluid as it warms. Tyrion is irritated by the alchemists' affections, their habit of addressing each other as wisdom, and insinuating that they possessed vast stores of secret knowledge doesn't align with the reality of a declining guild in shabby roads that no longer even pretends to practice metal transmutation. The Maesters of the Citadel have taken over almost every aspect of the once powerful guild, except for the production of wildfire, which remains a closely guarded secret of the guild. Helene explains that once ignited, wildfire cannot be extinguished, and will infiltrate materials like cloth, wood, leather, or even steel, setting them ablaze. Tyrion recalls from his knowledge of Thoros of Myre's flaming sword that even a thin coating of wildfire can burn for an hour, although it ruins the weapon. Curious about why the wildfire doesn't seep into the clay pots, Tyrion inquires, and Helene clarifies that it indeed does. They have a lower vault filled with pots dating back to the reign of King Aerys II Targaryen, who had a penchant for crafting the jars to resemble fruit. Technically, those jars should have been destroyed, but many of the guild's maesters were killed during the sack of King's Landing, leaving them without the expertise to dispose of the pots. Instead, they flooded the vaults. Helene also mentions that the whereabouts of a significant portion of King Aerys' stock were lost. including a discovery of 200 jars just last year beneath the Great Sept of Baelor. Although this older stock can still be used, Holain emphasizes caution because wildfire becomes more volatile with age. If left in direct sunlight for too long, it can self-ignite, causing it to expand violently and trigger a chain reaction among nearby jars. When Tyrion inquires about the total number of jars they possess, Holain quotes the morning count provided by Wisdom Muncatar, stating they have 7,840 jars in total, including 4,000 from King Aenys' older stock. He expresses confidence that the guild will fulfill its promise of 10,000 jars. Tyrion is astounded, pleased, and apprehensive. He is aware that creating wildfire is a time-consuming and hazardous process, and initially considered the number a mere boast. He emphasizes that he doesn't want any rush or subpar wildfire. Holain assures him that trained acolytes prepare the wildfire in specialized work cells designed to fill with sand and smother any fires or the unfortunate acolyte. While Tyrion is curious about inspecting how such a cell works, he is pressed for time. Holain reiterates the importance of handling wildfire with utmost care, suggesting that common soldiers in the chaos of battle may not exercise the same caution as trained pyromancers, and even a minor mistake could have catastrophic consequences. In response, Tyrion requests as many spare jars as possible to be delivered to each of the city gates. During their return journey, Holain emphasizes the honor of receiving the hand of the king, a rare occurrence since Lord Rossart, who was a member of their guild himself. The mention of Rossart triggers Tyrion's recollection of stories about Mad King Aerys II, utilizing the services of the alchemist to incinerate his adversaries. This thought leads Tyrion to conclude that it would be wise to keep Joffrey far away from the pyromancers to prevent him from harboring similar notions. Consequently, when Holain suggests hosting a feast for Joffrey, Tyrion explains that Joffrey has prohibited feasting, at Tyrion's insistence, until the war is concluded. However, Tyrion readily agrees when Holain proposes an alternative plan, a demonstration of the mysteries, practiced by his ancient order at the Red Keep. After all, there is no harm in a few entertaining illusions. After traversing the winding corridors of the Guildhall, they arrive at the long and echoing galley of the Iron Torches. Here, columns of wildfire flames burn around dark metal pillars and cast an emerged glow as they reflect off the black marble walls. However, Tyrion is less impressed, recognizing that the extravagant display of burning torches is merely intended to impress him, given the costly nature of wildfire. Having bid farewell to Holain at the entrance, Tyrion descends the brood steps leading to the Street of Sisters near Visenia's Hill, where Timid awaits with his litter and a retinue of burned men. This is an appropriate escort for a visit to the pyromancers and a necessary precaution, especially after Joffrey recently ordered the firing of arrows at a hungry mob outside the Red Keep's gates just 3 days ago. Tyrion is surprised to find Bronn waiting as well, bearing 2 messages. One is from Sir Jacelyn Bywater, who urgently requires Tyrion's presence at the Gate of the Gods. The other is a command from Cersei, instructing him to attend her in her chambers. Tyrion decides to meet with Bywater first, as he knows that Bywater doesn't waste his time. Making Cersei wait will only serve to frustrate her and make her act impulsively, which Tyrion prefers to dealing with when she is composed and cunning. As he crosses the normally bustling food market within the Gate of the Gods to meet Sir Jacelyn, Tyrion learns that Sir Cleos Frey has arrived with peace terms from Robb Stark. Tyrion is pleased by this news, but Cleos appears hesitant to discuss the terms since his instructions are to deliver them directly to Cersei. Looking weary and worn from his journey, Cleos describes the dire circumstances around the God's Eye and the Kingswood. The River Lords are resorting to burning their own crops to deprive the Lannisters of resources, and in response, the Lannisters are retaliating by ravaging villages and harming the small folk. Tyrion dismisses these brutal tactics as typical of war, while Cleos adds that even when carrying a peace banner, his party was attacked twice by groups of bandits, resulting in the loss of 3 men and 6 others wounded. Amused by the seemingly impossible peace terms proposed by Robb Stark, Tyrion learns from Cleos that Robb remains idle at Riverrun, possibly fearing a confrontation with Lord Tywin on the battlefield. Robb's position weakens as the River Lords disperse to protect their lands. Tyrion contemplates whether this was his father's strategy, and then informs Cleos that the terms, which include the exchange of William Lannister and Cleos' brother Theon Frey for Sansa and Arya Stark, are unacceptable. He tasks Cleos with carrying the small council's counteroffer back to Riverrun. Cleos is not thrilled about returning through a war-torn region and points out that it is Catelyn Stark who desires this peace, not Robb. Tyrion, however, emphasizes Catelyn's desire to reunite with her daughters and advises Cleos to rest and await further instructions. Tyrion reunites with Jacelyn Bywater, observing hundreds of recruits undergoing training beyond the gate. The City Watch attracts many newcomers among the refugees, offering food and shelter in exchange for their service. Tyrion acknowledges that while these recruits may be useful for maintaining order within the city, their value in actual combat is limited. He praises Bywater for contacting him and instructs him to extend hospitality to Ser Cleos and his escort, while keeping them stationed outside the city to conceal the true conditions within. Tyrion also directs Bywater to utilize the wildfire-filled jars that the alchemist will deliver to train crews for using wildfire in battle using paint and burning oil. Bywater, despite his distaste for wildfire, agrees with the wisdom of this measure, and Tyrion stresses the importance of making the best use of available resources. Reflecting in his letter, Tyrion considers the potential advantage of keeping Robb Stark preoccupied with negotiations for an easy peace at Riverrun until Sir Stafford Lannister can assemble his new forces at Castle Rock. This way, Stafford and Lord Tywin can converge on Robb's army from two sides, effectively crushing it. Tyrion wishes that the Baratheon brothers would be as cooperative, with Renly advancing along the Rosewood with his sizable southern army, and Stannis poised to sail his fleet up the Blackwater Rush soon. Tyrion finds limited comfort in his stockpile of wildfire. Tyrion is pulled from his thoughts by a commotion in Cobbler's Square, where a sizable crowd gathers to listen to a prophet dressed as a begging brother. This prophet, referring to the red comet in the sky above Aegon's high hill as the Father's Scourge, delivers his message. We have become swollen, bloated, foul. Brother couples with sister in the bed of kings, and the fruit of their incest capers in his place to the piping of a twisted little monkey demon. Even the High Septon has forgotten the gods. Cleanse yourselves, the gods cry out, lest ye be cleansed. Bathe in the wine of righteousness, or you shall be bathed in fire. Wounded by the insult of being called a twisted little monkey demon, Tyrion takes some solace in the mocking laughter that drowns out the prophet's shouts as he instructs the burned men to clear a path. He secretly agrees with the prophet's criticisms of the High Septon, recalling a joke made by Moonboy at the fat cleric's expense. Returning to the Red Keep without further incidents, Tyrion climbs to his chambers in an optimistic mood, believing that he only needs time to figure things out. Upon entering his solar, he is confronted by Cersei, who is furious with him for ignoring her summons and plotting to marry off her daughter like a commodity. Knowing that his scheme has succeeded, Tyrion points out that princesses like Marcella are often married off in political alliances, suggesting that Cersei might have considered marrying her to Tommen. Cersei vehemently opposes sending Marcella to Dorne, but Tyrion argues that Dorne would be a safer place for her than King's Landing, given the strained relations between House Lannister and House Martell that have only spanned a single generation. In contrast, the Dornish have a long history of conflict with Storm's End and Highgarden. Tyrion explains that his proposal involves Marcella becoming a ward of Prince Doran Martell until she reaches the age of 14, at which point she will marry Trystane Martell, who was only 2 years older. Cersei fears that Marcella would be a hostage, but Tyrion believes she would be treated more kindly than Sansa Stark, especially with Ser Aerys Oakheart of the Kingsguard as her sworn protector. Cersei remains concerned that Doran Martell might seek refuge for the murderer of his sister, Alia Martell, by killing Marcella. However, Tyrion assures her that Doran is too honorable to harm an innocent girl, and that the terms of the agreement are too attractive for him to refuse, as he has offered the prince a council seat and some castles on the Dornish marches, as well as the killer of his sister. Cersei accuses Tyrion of making these decisions without her consent, and he teasingly suggests that she might want to offer sexual favors instead. When she slaps him, Tyrion warns her that it will be the last time, but Cersei merely laughs and questions the reliability of his belief in their father's letter protecting him, drawing a parallel to Eddard Stark's misplaced faith in King Robert's last will. Tyrion privately notes that he has the City Watch, his clansmen, and a group of sellswords on his side, though he supposes that Stark might have had similar delusions of support. Rather than engage in a further argument, Tyrion asserts that Renly and Stannis will display Marsilla's head alongside Cersei's if they seize the city. To his surprise, Cersei starts crying, something he has not witnessed since their childhood. He attempts to offer comfort, but she recoils, which hurts him more than her earlier slap. Tyrion reassures her that nothing will happen to Marcilla, but Cersei accuses him of lying and reminds him of his unfulfilled promise to free Jaime. Tyrion reassures her that Jaime is safe in Riverrun until he can devise a plan to rescue his release. Cersei expresses regret that she couldn't take more decisive action if she were a man and questions Jaime's capture while wondering why their father remains hidden in Harrenhal. Tyrion reassures her that Lord Tywin is actively engaged in warfare and suggests that Tywin is strategically waiting for the right moment to strike, comparing him to a lion ready to pounce, while portraying Robb Stark as a fawn paralyzed by fear. However, Cersei remains skeptical, arguing that Jaime wouldn't stay passive if their father were taken prisoner. Tyrion privately agrees with her assessment of Jaime's importance, but refrains from saying so out loud. Instead, he asserts that not everyone can be as audacious as Jaime, and that there are alternative ways to win a war, emphasizing Harrenhal's strength and strategic location. Cersei points out that King's Landing lacks the same advantages, and that Renly's army is approaching the city. Tyrion tries to reassure her by saying that the city won't fall quickly, allowing Lord Tywin sufficient time to march down the King's Road and attack Renly from the rear. Seeking further reassurance, Cersei asks about the scenario if Robb Stark decides to march up on the city. Tyrion explains that Harrenhal serves as an obstacle preventing Roose Bolton from crossing the Trident to unite with the northern forces, and even if he could, Robb lacks the strength to capture Harrenhal and then move on to King's Landing. He also mentions that Lord Tywin's army is thriving in the fertile Riverlands, and their uncle Stafford is raising another army at Castle Rock. Curious about Tyrion's source of information, Cersei inquires if Lord Tywin confided to him. Tyrion replies that he simply examined a map, which leads Cersei to dismiss his insights as mere speculation. Holding out Robb's proposed peace terms, Tyrion questions why Robb would offer such terms, even if they are unacceptable, if he were winning the war. Cersei, now resuming her regal demeanor, asks why Tyrion received the terms instead of her. Tyrion humorously responds that his role as Hand of the King involves handing things to her. As he hands her the letter, he privately reflects that enduring Cersei's slap was a small price to pay for her agreement to the Dornish marriage proposal, which he consents she will now accept, identifying the informant is just the cherry on top of his success. So, a lot of the wildfire pots dating from the reign of King Aerys II are probably still hidden underground in King's Landing, and the undisposed of pots that have accumulated and flooded the basement of the Alchemist Guild will probably ignite when Daenerys takes the city like we saw on the TV show, and all of King's Landing will burn. And maybe this is where Daenerys will get the label of Mad Queen, when she actually didn't intend to kill everyone in King's Landing. This chapter also showcases Tywin's military genius in placing himself at Harrenhal, where he can hold off 4 enemy armies all at once. Stannis knows he can't attack the capital because Tywin will smash him against King's Landing's walls. Robb Stark can't reunite with half his army under the command of Roose Bolton. Meanwhile, Tywin gets to live off the Riverlands with plunder, and Renly either has to attack Tywin at Harrenhal or risk being smashed against the walls of King's Landing like Stannis. In Chapter 21, Bran enters Winterfell's Great Hall astride his horse, Dancer, ready for the harvest feast. He silently wishes that Summer, his loyal wolf, could be by his side, but Sir Roderick Castle's stern decision prevented it. Amid the bustling crowd seated on the benches, the men erupt with shouts of "Stark!" and "Winterfell" as he passes by. Bran understands that their cheers are not just for him, but for the bountiful harvest, the victories, and the legacy of the Starks who came before him. Still, a surge of pride fills him, momentarily making him forget his physical limitations, until he reaches the raised platform. There, Osha and Hodor assist in unstrapping him and carry him to the elevated seat. To Bran's left sit Sir Rodrik, his daughter Beth, and Maester Luwin, while Rickon occupies the space to his right. Rickon's hair remains uncut since their mother's departure, an act of defiance after he bit the last girl who tried to trim it. After Sir Rodrik commands everyone to quiet down, Bran extends a warm welcome to the guests and urges them to express gratitude to the gods for Robb's triumphs and the abundant harvest. His toast, "May there be 100 more," is met with resounding cheers, and Sir Rodrik mentions that Bran's father would have been proud. The feast unfolds with a succession of courses, including seafood brought by Lord Wyman Manderley from White Harbour. Manderley has also arranged for musicians, but only Hodor seems to be paying them any attention, as their melodies get lost amidst the chatter and laughter. Sir Rodrik and Maester Luwin engage in a conversation over Beth's head, while Rickon joyfully interacts with Little Walder and Big Walder. Bran had reservations about having the Walders at the high table, but Maester Luwin reminded him of the upcoming marriages that would connect the families when Robb marries one of their aunts, and Arya weds their uncle, Almir Frey. Bran, however, argued that Arya would never agree to such an arrangement. Each dish is presented to Bran first, and soon he is too full to taste everything, so he nods in approval. Following instruction, he sends particularly delicious dishes to the lords as a gesture of goodwill. Salmon for the sombre lady Donella Hornwood, boar for Morris and Hotha Umber, goosenberries for Clay Serwyn, lobster for Joseph, the master of horse, who trains Dancer, sweets for Hodor and Old Nan, whom he adores, and beets and turnips for the Walders, as per Sir Rodrik's insistence. Bran observes the feast with a sense of detachment, where he sees everything happening around him, but feels disconnected from it all. He witnesses Osha's swift reaction to a tall heart man's inappropriate advances by smashing a flagon over his head. In contrast, another woman seems unperturbed by Mikken's wandering hand beneath her bodice. Bran also observes Farland commanding his red dog to perform tricks, while Old Nan absent-mindedly picks at the crust of a hot pie. On the elevated platform, Bran notices Lord Manderley indulging in a plate of lampreys from his specially designed chair, Lady Hornwood appearing melancholic as she barely touches her food, and the Umber brothers engrossed in a drinking game. The combination of the heat and noise eventually becomes overwhelming for Bran, and he yearns for the tranquility of the Godswood. As he gazes at his father's intricately crafted goblet, Bran reminisces about the welcoming feast held for King Robert. It dawns on him that everyone else has departed, either to war, captivity, the wall, or the grave. Even the men at the tables are new, as those who accompanied his father south are no longer alive, and the rest have joined Robb in the war effort. Bran can't help but wonder who will be absent in the coming years, and this thought threatens to bring tears to his eyes. However, he reminds himself that he is the Stark responsible for Winterfell and is nearly a grown man. The doors to the hall swing open, and Albedi rushes in two new arrivals, Mira and Jojen Reed, hailing from Greywater Watch. Bran identifies them as Kragonmen from the Neck, a reserved and humble group who seldom venture out of their marshly homeland. However, Little Walder derogatorily refers to them as Mudmen, and wrongly explains to Rickon that they are thieves and cowards with green teeth due to their frog-eating habits. As places are hastily prepared on the elevated platform, Sir Rodrik elucidates that these are likely the offspring of Howland Reed, a close friend and steadfast companion of Bran's father during Robert's rebellion. Mira, the slender girl, is equipped with a woven net, a bronze knife, and a frog spear, in addition to an iron helmet, a leather shield, and a bronze scale jerkin. Her younger brother, Jojen, dressed entirely in green, accentuates the deep green of his eyes. Kneeling before the platform, the Reeds express their intention to reaffirm House Reed's loyalty to the King in the North. Bran clarifies that Robb is away at war, but welcomes them to speak their pledge to him. Together the Reeds recite their age-old oath, pledging their allegiance to the Starks of Winterfell by earth and water, bronze and iron and ice and fire, vowing never to falter. Uncertain how to respond, Bran eventually offers, "May your winters be short and your summers bountiful," and bids them to rise. Meera presents gifts of fish, frog, and fowl, and Bran reciprocates with Winterfell's meat and mead. Jojen immediately inquires about the whereabouts of the direwolves, and Rickon replies that they are in the Godswood because Shaggy Dog misbehaved. When Meera expresses a desire to see them, Little Walder warns that they might bite. Delighted by the Reeds' interest, Bran assures them that at least Summer won't bite and will keep Shaggy Dog at bay. Bran realizes that he has never met a Crannog man before and would like to engage in conversation, but the raucous feast makes it challenging. Upon learning from Sir Roderick that the Reeds indeed eat frogs, Bran sends them mutton, arroches, and beef stew, which they appear to enjoy. When Meera catches him gazing at her, Bran blushes. After the tables have been cleared, the music and singing become more energetic. Morris Umber seizes a passing serving girl and starts twirling her around the dance floor, and soon others join in the revelry. Hodor dances on his own, while Waymond Manderley and later Clay Serwyn takes turns dancing with young Beth Castle. Sir Roderick approaches Lady Hornwood, but she politely declines. Unable to partake in the festivities once again, Bran watches for a while out of curiosity, then summons Hodor to carry him to bed, aware of the curious gazes from onlookers. Just outside the hall, they encounter Joseth and a giggling woman with her skirts hiked up. The woman screams upon seeing Hodor watching, prompting Bran to instruct Hodor to leave them be. With assistance in removing his boots and breeches, Bran dismisses Hodor and settles down to sleep. However, he recalls his father mentioning that the King's Guard was once a noble institution and that Sir Arthur Dayne, the greatest knight he ever witnessed, would have defeated him if not for Howland Reed's intervention. His father grew somber at that point and said no more, leaving Bran to wish he had inquired further. As Bran drifts off to sleep, thoughts of knights fill his mind, but his dreams transport him back to the Godswood and the presence of wolves. He can still hear and smell the ongoing feast. At the sound of clinking iron, he and his brother dash to confront unfamiliar intruders, a female and a young male who display no signs of fear. Bran recognizes Meera's voice as she inquires whether Jojen anticipated the wolves being so large. Jojen remarks that they are still growing, and he suggests that Shaggy Dog is filled with fear and anger, while Summer possesses more strength than they realize. Meera advises caution, but Jojen insists that today is not the day he will die and reaches out to touch Summer. Upon contact, Bran loses consciousness, feeling as though he is falling once more. So, this chapter introduces a slew of northern characters who do not appear in Season 2 of the show because of the Harvest Festival to celebrate the end of summer was removed. It is interesting how confident and self-assured Jojen is south of the Wall, only for that to completely stop once they are north of the Wall, as though whoever was guiding Jojen or sending him visions cannot penetrate the icy wall. It's fun to see Wyman Manderley before his intense A Dance with Dragons plotline. In the midst of the rolling grasslands, Catelyn dreams of a reunion with her family. In this dream, Bran is whole, Arya and Sansa hold hands, Rickon is still a babe at her breast, and Robb, crownless, plays with a wooden sword. The dream is sweet but fleeting. The cruel light of dawn wakes her to the harsh reality of aching loneliness and weariness. Weariness from riding, hurting, and the weight of duty. She longs for a respite from strength, to be foolish and frightened, if only for a short while. Outside her tent, the camp stirs to life. Horses whicker, Shad complains, and Sir Wendell calls for his bow. Catelyn wishes them away, weary even of the loyal men around her. Her heart yearns for her children. She promises herself that one day she'll allow herself to be less strong, but today is not that day. Her fingers, scarred from past battles, fumble with her clothes. She reflects on the Valyrian steel dagger that caused those scars, a reminder of the deep and sharp wounds it inflicted. Shad stirs oats into a kettle, and Sir Wendell, eager to please, suggests a roast quail for breakfast. Catelyn declines, opting for oats and bread, aware of the long journey that lies ahead. Robb has sent 20 of his best men from Winterfell to accompany her to Renly. along with 5 lordlings to add weight to her mission. They travel cautiously, avoiding towns and holdfasts, and have seen signs of war in the distance, but remain unmolested. The worst is behind them once they cross the Blackwater. Catelyn never wanted this mission, as she expressed to Robb in Riverrun. She argues for patience, to let the seeds they've planted grow. Robb, feeling the pressure of a dwindling army, insists on action, contemplating marching against Harrenhal. Catelyn questions the wisdom of such a move, but Robb is determined to assert his strength and not appear weak. The memory of the farewell with her ailing father at Riverrun brings a wan smile to her face. She reflects on the inevitability of her journey south when her heart pulls her north, toward home. She has written to Bran and Rickon, assuring them she hasn't forgotten them, but emphasizing that Robb needs her more. As they approach the Upper Manda, Sir Wendell announces that they'll soon reach Renly's camp. Catelyn contemplates the difficult task ahead, speaking to Renly, a man her son does not recognize as a true king. She is wary of making enemies and hopes for friends. Suddenly, they are taken captive by Renly's outriders, led by Sir Colin of Greenpools. The knight, courteously but firmly, acknowledges Renly as the crowned and anointed Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Catelyn, uncertain if she's an escort or a captive, can only trust in the honor of Sir Colin and the intentions of Lord Renly. Approaching Renly's camp, Catelyn and her company see smoke rising from campfires an hour away from the river. As they draw closer, the indistinct murmur transforms into the sounds of a vast host. The Manda's muddy waters come into view, and the scale of Renly's army overwhelms them. Thousands of cookfires create a pale, smoky haze, and the horse lines stretch out for leagues. Siege engines, banners, and knights' pavilions dot the landscape. Sir Wendell Manderly remarks on the formidable sight. Renly has railed most of the chivalry from the south. Highgarden's golden rose, House Tyrell's sigil, is prominent. Banners of various houses, unfamiliar to Catelyn, fly alongside the known ones. The Storm Lords across the Manda display their standards. Renly's bannerman from Storm's End, Renly's massive war banner featuring the crowned stag of Baratheon, flies high over all. Hallis Mullen draws attention to a distant noise, and Catelyn identifies shouting, horses screaming, the clash of steel, and cheering. As they ride toward brightly colored pavilions on a slope, the noise intensifies. They stumble upon a melee below a small castle, a tourney in full swing with knights charging and slashing at each other, watched by a crowd. Hal Mullen states the obvious, and Sir Wendell Manderly, excited, praises the spectacle. The crowd impedes their progress, prompting Sir Colin to suggest Catelyn's men wait while he presents her to the king. The crowd roars as they move through. Catelyn observes the chaotic tourney, expressing her disapproval of Renly's diversion into play war while real enemies surround them, and half the realm is in flames. In the galley, lords and ladies are captivated by the ongoing melee. Catelyn recognizes familiar faces such as Lord Mathis Rowan, Lady Oakhart, and Lord Randall Tarly, among others. But the focal point is Renly Baratheon, sitting with his young queen, Margaery Tyrell. Renly, reminiscent of Robert in looks, wears a golden crown and a green velvet tunic featuring the crowned stag in the colors of Highgarden. Margaery, daughter of Lord Mace Tyrell, adds strength to the Southern Alliance through her marriage to Renly. Renly and Margaery cheer on Sir Loras Tyrell, also known as the Knight of Flowers, as he dominates the melee. Loras, riding a white stallion and wielding a long-handled axe, displays remarkable skill. Only 4 combatants on horse remain, and it becomes evident that the crowd favors Sir Loras. 2 others ally against a blue-clad knight from Tarth, but are quickly unhorsed. The battle narrows down to Loras and the blue-armored knight. Forced to discard his now broken shield for the final duel, the Blue Knight is at a disadvantage and soon disarmed by Sir Loras. Despite his efforts, Sir Loras's agility and precision overwhelm him. The crowd rallies behind Sir Loras, shouting, "Highgarden!" The confrontation intensifies, and Sir Loras seems posed for the final blow. However, the Blue Knight, displaying surprise resilience, charges into Loras's axe. The clash results in a struggle, and the 2 knights fall to the ground as their horses pull apart. Loras, at the bottom, bears the brunt of the impact. The Blue Knight extracts the dirt and opens Loras's visor. Although the crowd's cheers drown out their words, Catelyn witnesses Loras mouthing the word, "Yield." The Blue Knight struggles to his feet, raising his dirk in salute to King Renly Baratheon. Squires rush to help the young knight, revealing his youth as they remove his helm. Despite his potential comeliness, injuries mar his face, making it difficult to ascertain. King Renly invites the champion to approach the gallery, and upon closer inspection, the brilliance of the blue armor fades, displaying scars and signs of battle. The crowd remains mostly silent as the Blue Knight, identified as Brienne of Tarth, kneels before the king. Catelyn questions Sir Colin about the apparent dislike towards Brienne. He explains that Brienne is no man, but Lord Selwyn the Evenstar's daughter, known as Brienne the Beauty, in a mocking tone. Renly announces Brienne as the victor and grants her any boon. Brienne requests to join Renly's Rainbow Guard, pledging her life to him. As Renly grants her request, Catelyn realizes the irony of the nickname Beauty when Brienne removes her helm. Despite her unconventional appearance, Brienne's loyalty and strength shine through. Renly's attention shifts to Catelyn as Sir Colin introduces her as an envoy from her son, Robb, the King in the North. Renly is surprised by her presence and introduces her to his young queen, Margaery Tyrell. Despite the polite exchange, Catelyn senses the shallowness of the king's promise to avenge her husband's murder. When Renly mentions attacking Harrenhal, Catelyn remains tight-lipped about Robb's plans. Lord Randall Tarly criticizes Robb for not paying homage himself, but Catelyn defends her son's commitment to the war. Renly invites Catelyn to a farewell feast and offers her his pavilion. He displays a playful demeanor, discussing his lack of interest in Lord Caswell's daughters and emphasizing his devotion to Margaery. As Renly departs with his queen, Catelyn is escorted to the Queen's Green Silk Pavilion, where she is assured of any assistance she may need. Catelyn finds it hard to fathom what more she might require, given the lavish provisions in the pavilion. The spacious tent rivals the common rooms of many inns, equipped with every comfort imaginable, from a feather mattress and sleeping furs to a large wood and copper tub, braziers for warmth, slung leather camp chairs, a writing table with quills and inkpot, bowls of peaches, plums, and pears, a flagon of wine with matching silver cups, cedar chests filled with Renly's belongings, books, maps, game boards, a high harp, a tall bow with a quiver of arrows, to a pair of red-tailed hunting hawks, and an armory stocked with fine weapons. Catelyn acknowledges Renly's generosity, understanding why his host moves slowly. Beside the entrance stands the king's armor, a forest green plate adorned with gold fittings and a helm crowned by a rack of golden antlers. The polished steel reflects Catelyn's image like a mirror, prompting thoughts of a drowned woman. She dismisses self-pity, reminding herself of the urgency to wash off the dust and change into a more suitable gown for the feast. Accompanied by her high-born companions, Catelyn enters Lord Caswell's castle. The Great Hall, though only great by courtesy, accommodates Catelyn's men among Renly's knights. On the days, Catelyn sits between Lord Mathis Rowan and Sir Jon Fossaway. Lord Mathis politely inquires about her family, while Sir Jon makes jests. Brienne of Tarth, seated at the far end of the high table, wears knight's attire, a velvet doublet, quartered rose and azure, breeches, boots, and a rainbow cloak. Despite the finery, Brienne's plainness is unmistakable, and she appears uncomfortable, rarely lifting her gaze. The feast offers a bountiful array of dishes untouched by the war. Pears poached in wine, tiny savory fish, capons stuffed with onions and mushrooms, loaves of brown bread, turnips, sweet corn, peas, hams, roast geese, Venetian stewed with beer and barley, and an assortment of pastries from Lord Caswell's kitchens. Despite feeling queasy, Catelyn eats sparingly, observing Renly, who sits between his young bride and her brother, Sir Loras. Sir Loras, apart from a white linen bandage around his brow, appears unharmed, revealing a comely face with lively, intelligent eyes and a tumble of brown locks. He wears a new tawny cloak in the brilliantly stripped silk of Renly's Rainbow Guard, clasped with the golden rose of Highgarden. At times, King Renly feeds Margaery choice morsels of his dagger or plants light kisses on her cheek, but it's Sir Loras who shares most of his jests and confidences. The king, while clearly enjoying food and drink, doesn't seem a glutton or a drunkard. He laughs often, conversing amicably with both high-born lords and lowly serving wenches. However, some guests are less restrained, drinking excessively and boasting loudly. Catelyn is displeased with the behaviour of Lord Willem's sons Joshua and Elias, who argue about who will be first over the walls of King's Landing. Lord Vernier engages in inappropriate behaviour with a serving girl, and Gaillard the Green, a self-proclaimed singer, composes a verse about tying lions' tails in knot. Sir Mark Mullendore brings a monkey, and Sir Tanton of the Red Apple Fassaways vows to slay Sandor Clegane in single combat. The height of folly is reached when a fool, gold-painted and with a cloth lion's head, chases a dwarf around the tables, beating him with a bladder. King Renly corrects the fool's claim of being the kinslayer to Kingslayer, eliciting laughter from the hall. Lord Rowan, seated beside Catelyn, comments on the youthfulness of the attendees. The Knight of Flowers was a babe during the sack of King's Landing, and most others are not much older. Catelyn observes them as unblooded, still seeing the chance for glory and honour in the wars. She reflects on how war will make them old, as it did for her generation. Lord Rowan questions her pity, emphasising the youth's strength, vitality, and lust. Catelyn responds, expressing her pity because their current state of youth and laughter will not last. She notes that they are knights of summer, and winter is coming for all. Brienne interrupts, offering a different perspective, asserting that in songs, knights are always gallant, maids beautiful, and the sun always shines. Catelyn thinks about the winter that came for her when Ned died, but refrains from sharing it with Brienne. Renly saves Catelyn from further discussion by inviting her for a walk. Brienne offers her protection, but Renly dismisses the need, assuring her safety within Lord Caswell's castle. Brienne reluctantly sits, and Renly takes Catelyn's arm, leading her out of the hall. On the roof, Renly points out the numerous campfires around Riverrun and speculates on Robb's army's strength, claiming to have twice the number. He mentions Mace Tyrell at Highgarden, a garrison at Storm's End, and Stannis on Dragonstone. Catelyn questions Renly about Stannis, but he dismisses Stannis' claim, emphasizing Stannis' lack of popularity. Catelyn points out Stannis' elder brother status, but Renly brushes it aside, defending his own claim with Robert's example. He invites Robb to support him, promising generosity, but insists on fealty and homage. Renly is interrupted by news of a siege at Storm's End. A rider reports that Stannis is at the gates, calling himself King Stannis now. It is frustrating to think how easily Renly would have won the Game of Thrones with Mace Tyrell's backing and Randall Tarly in charge of his army. Tywin would have had no hope in stopping him, with Jaime's forces already crushed and being forced to abandon Harrenhal to stop Renly from taking King's Landing. Also, unlike in the show, Brienne didn't know Renly was gay and was romantically in love with him, which is sadder and more human. In Chapter 23, Jon Snow is riding alongside a grumpy Lord Commander who has an equally irritable raven perched on his shoulder. They've endured 6 days of relentless rain, making the already treacherous ground even more challenging to traverse. Jon's thoughts drift to Pypar and Todda, who are likely sitting by the fire in the common room to escape the inclement weather. The Lord Commander expresses relief upon hearing Jarman Buckwell's horn, indicating that there are still people at Craster's Keep. They have passed through 7 villages so far, all of them devoid of any signs of life. Jon has heard various tales about Craster, the man they are heading to meet. Thorin Smallwood claims he's a friend of the Night's Watch, but he has a questionable reputation. Tywin has labelled him with numerous unsavoury epithets, including kinslayer, liar, rapist, coward, and slaver. The Lord Commander instructs Jon to relay a message down the column. He wants no trouble with Craster's women, and the men must be respectful, keeping their hands to themselves and avoiding conversation with the women. As Jon rides along the line, he eventually reaches Sam, who is responsible for the baggage. The ravens are behaving restlessly due to their dislike of the rain, much like the men. Sam reports that he's doing okay, but soaked. When Jon informs him that Craster's keep is nearby, Sam shares some unsettling information he's heard about Craster. Edison Tollett claims that Craster marries his daughters, follows his own laws, and Tywin has even suggested he has black blood. Sam almost goes as far as to call Craster a derogatory term, but Jon finishes the thought for him, acknowledging that he's heard that word before. Jon then continues to the rear of the column to deliver the news to Sir Odin Withers, who welcomes it as good tidings, considering he has always appeared fatigued and the rain has taken a toll on his appearance. On his way back up the column, Jon takes a shortcut through the woods. Hearing some rustling, he initially thinks it might be his direwolf Ghost, but it turns out to be Dwen and Gren. Jon informs them that Craster is alive, sparking a discussion about how many wives he might have. Soon, Ghost joins Jon as they ride ahead toward Craster's keep. Upon arriving at the keep, Jon's disappointment is palpable. He didn't anticipate finding a grand stone castle, but what lies before him can only be described as a decrepit and filthy mess. Inside the compound, he observes a young naked girl tending to carrots, while two women prepare a pig for slaughter. The barking of Chet's hounds is met with a response of Craster's own dogs. Some of the dogs are curious about Ghost, Jon's direwolf, while others growl at the newcomer. But Ghost remains unfazed. Jon estimates that only around 30 to 50 people will find shelter in the hole, leaving the remaining 200 out in the cold. Dolores Ed is in charge of the commander's horse and informs Jon that he is to join the commander in the hole, but Ghost is to remain outside. Inside the squalid and foul-smelling hole, Jon finds 24 rangers already present, including Jarman Buckwell and Thorin Smallwood. Jon had eagerly looked forward to the wonders beyond the wall, feeling a sense of regret that Piper and Todder aren't here to experience it. Craster, the only one seated in a chair, stands out even as the commander is regulated to a bench. Jon can't help but recall old Nan's stories of wildlies drinking from human skulls. Overhearing Craster mention not seeing Brandon Stark for 3 years, Jon's attention is piqued. In the background, poorly dressed women are busy preparing food and distributing beer while a group of puppies and a pig scuttle about. Mormont informs Craster about the missing Sir Waymar Royce, Jared, and Will. Craster remembers the 3 men but has no knowledge of their whereabouts. He does, however, mention that his wives took a liking to the proud young Sir Waymar, who refused to sleep under Craster's roof. The commander discusses the deserted villages they've encountered and the wights that attacked Castle Black. Craster pretends not to know, but one of his wives betrays her fear by her expression. Craster declines the offer of an escort back to the wall, declaring himself a member of the Free Folk. He even has his wife confirm that this is their place. Craster keeps them safe and it's preferable to die free. Jarman Buckwell inquires about Craster's king, Mance Rayder, and Craster asserts that the Free Folk have no need for kings. When one of Mance's men came to tell him to leave his keep and submit to Mance, Craster sent the messenger back without a tongue. Craster informs the commander that they can sleep on the floor, but will only provide food for 20 men. Mormont expresses gratitude for the shelter and shares that they have food and wine to offer in return. Craster is particularly interested in the wine and sternly warns that anyone who touches one of his wives will lose a hand. Mormont reluctantly agrees to the condition. Craster then inquires if there's a man among them who can draw maps. Jon volunteers Sam for the task and is instructed to fetch Sam with quail and parchment, along with Mormont's axe as a guest gift. Craster notices Jon Stark's like appearance and learns that Jon is Mormont's steward and squire. Upon hearing the name Snow, Craster recognizes Jon as a bastard and advises him that a man who desires a woman should marry her, as Craster does. Jon nearly collides with Otton Withers as he exits the hall. Outside, he notices tents springing up all around the compound. He relays Craster's request to Dolores Ed, who humorously suggests that the commander will receive his axe back, buried in his skull. Upon learning that Smallwood considers Craster a friend, Ed explains that the difference between wildling friends and enemies is that friends bury you in secret graves. While finishing up feeding the horses, Jon hears a fearful shout. He finds Ghost confronting a 15-year-old girl with 2 rabbits. Jon assures her that Ghost won't harm her and asks if she is one of Craster's daughters, to which she reveals that she's now his wife and has hoped to breed the rabbits. Jon realizes that Ghost must have gone after the caged rabbits because he was hungry. He expresses his intention to pay for them even though he has no money, promising that the Night's Watch will make amends. The girl addresses Jon as Lord, but he corrects her, stating that he's not a lord. Ranger Lark from the Sisterman identifies Jon as Lord Snow himself and remarks on Ghost looking hungry. Jon attempts to assure the girl that Ghost won't harm her, but Chet interjects, claiming that Lark is warning her. The girl then remembers her restriction not to talk to them. Chet further insinuates that Jon wouldn't be so bold without Ghost presence, blaming Jon for losing his position as Maester Aemon's steward. When Lark chimes in, suggesting Jon is a coward without his wolf, Jon decides to leave the conversation. It takes some time for Jon to locate Sam, and he actually finds him with Ghost's help, who discovers Sam beneath a rocky outcrop. Ghost has brought Jon a second rabbit, and Jon informs Sam that the commander wants him to create a map. Jon proceeds to cook the meager rabbit over a fire, filling the air with an enticing aroma that earns envious looks from the other rangers. After Sam departs with the quill and parchment, Jon falls asleep, hoping that the information Sam gathers will lead them to Uncle Benjen. He awakens at dawn to find Ghost missing and a delicate layer of ice covering everything. He reflects on his sisters, particularly Sansa, who would describe this scene as enchanting. Jon hears his name being called and discovers the girl with the rabbit wearing Sam's cloak. She inquires if he's the king's brother, and he explains that he's his half-brother. Jon is concerned about Craster, but Gilly reassures him, saying that her father will sleep most of the day due to his excessive drinking. Gilly then expresses her desire for king's justice and wishes to leave Craster's compound. She explains that it won't be too bad if she has a girl, because Craster will let her grow up and marry her, but if she gives birth to a boy, he will be sacrificed to the gods. Nella, another woman there, has told her the baby will be male, and Gilly believes she can predict these things, having had 6 boys herself. She informs Jon that when the white cold arrives, Craster sacrifices the boys, and it has been happening more frequently, leading to the sacrifice of their sheep. Next, it will be the dogs. The cold gods come at night as white shadows. Jon recalls the 2 whites they encountered and asks about the color of their eyes, to which Gilly responds that they are bright blue. She believes that since Jon didn't partake in Craster's hospitality, he isn't bound to him and requests to be taken to the wall. However, Jon informs her that they are traveling in the opposite direction and the decision lies with the old crow, not him. Disheartened, Gilly leaves. Jon joins Dwen, Gren, and Hake for breakfast. Dwen boasts about having been with 3 of the women that night, a claim met with skepticism. Jon inquires if Sam slept in the hall and learns that the hard ground, foul-smelling rushes, and loud snoring, particularly from Brown Bernard, made it impossible to sleep well. Jon then excuses himself to attend to the Lord Commander. As Jon heads towards the hall, he passes by the scouts, and Jarman Buckwell advises him to keep his sword sharp as they will likely need it soon. Inside the hall, the commander's raven announces Jon's arrival by requesting corn. When the commander inquires about the weather, Jon reports that the rain has stopped, but it remains cold. Mormont instructs Jon to prepare his horse as they plan to depart within the hour. There's some food available, but Jon declines, deciding not to partake in Craster's hospitality. Behind the wall, Jon finds Sam with Gilly. Gilly quietly leaves, and Sam explains that he had hoped Jon could do something for her. Jon asks what he could have done, suggesting they wrap her in a cloak and take her with them. Sam admits that Jon is right, but Gilly is afraid, and maybe they can take her with them when they return. Jon mentions that the commander would not allow them to take one of Craster's wives and excuses himself to groom and saddle the horses. Riding alongside Mormont, Jon observes that Craster has no sons or sheep. Mormont acknowledges that Craster sacrifices his sons to the woods, a practice known to all the Rangers, though it's not spoken of openly. Mormont admits that if he could, he would have taken the boys and raised them as members of the Night's Watch, but the wildlings follow crueler gods. He also asks Jon if he spoke to one of Craster's wives, to which Jon confirms. Mormont hints at the opportunity to kill Craster with him drunk and a new axe nearby, but emphasizes the Night's Watch's need for Craster, as his keep has saved many Rangers' lives. Jon mentions a saying his father had, about how a brutal or unjust bannerman shames his liege lord, but Mormont points out that Craster is not a bannerman and has sworn no vows. After Jon informs Mormont about Buckwell's warning regarding the sword, Mormont reveals that Craster mentioned Mance Rayder gathering his people at Frostfangs, a harsh and unforgiving wilderness of stone and ice. He expects Mance to invade the realm. Jon recalls historical invasions by figures like Raymond Redbeard and Bael the Bard, and adds that Joramun once blew the horn of winter to wake the giants. Mormont acknowledges this, but notes that the Watch is now a mere shadow of its former self, and Winterfell is vulnerable with Robb Stark marching south. The situation presents a significant opportunity for the wildlings, and their only chance is to find Mance Rayder and stop him. So, a reason for why the Watch and wildlings allow Craster to live when he is openly sacrificing his sons to the others is that he is giving them poisoned goods, in that the boys he sends them are incestuous and probably defective offspring. Therefore, without good genetic stock, the others are suffering from inbred depression, which explains why they have become more aggressive and willing to attack wildling villages in hopes of acquiring more offspring. This is the same reason why wildlings don't marry within, but steal from other tribes. Ygritte even tells Jon this. She punched him. "That's vile. Would you bed your sister? Longspear's not your brother. He's of my village. You know nothing, Jon Snow. A true man steals a woman from afar, to strengthen the clan. Women who bed brothers or fathers or clan kin offend the gods, and are cursed with weak and sickly children, even monsters. Craster weds his daughters," Jon pointed out. She punched him again. "Craster's more your kind than ours." So, even the wildlings know about inbred depression and how you can't just marry your cousins or distant kin, since it produces weak and deformed offspring. In Chapter 24, Theon Greyjoy encounters a woman who catches his attention. She is an Ironborn, lean and long-legged, with a dirk at her belt. Despite her unconventional appearance, Theon is intrigued by her. As they banter, it becomes clear that she is a skilled shipwright named Eskrid, married to Sigrun, the builder of Theon's new longship. Theon, trying to impress her, suggests naming the ship after her. Their conversation takes a flirtatious turn when Theon expresses interest in Eskrid, despite her being married and pregnant. Theon invites her aboard his ship, and their interaction becomes increasingly suggestive. Eskrid maintains her playful demeanor, but reminds Theon of her marital status. The encounter ends with a hint of potential intimacy, leaving Theon contemplating the consequences of bringing Eskrid to Pike. Theon, feeling flustered after a suggestive exchange with Eskrid, suggests they head back to the castle. Despite her initial reluctance, she agrees, and they walk together. Theon notices the respect he commands in Lordsport as the crew of longships acknowledge him. The arrival of Lord Goodbrother's fleet adds to the bustling atmosphere, with rumours circulating about beardless boys in sashes and a less than desirable inn. As they stroll, Eskrid engages with familiar faces, showing her popularity among the townsfolk. Theon learns about potential crew members, including Bluetooth, a seafarer with a sweet ship of his own. Eskrid advises Theon on choosing a crew that has rowed together before, emphasizing the importance of teamwork on a longship. Their conversation turns to Lordsport, offering of strong arms and Eskrid's well-known status as the shipwright's wife. Theon proposes that she assists him in selecting the crew, subtly appealing to her. Eskrid agrees, hinting that her assistance is contingent on his kindness. Approaching the Myra Ham, Theon observes the captain's daughter expressing interest in him. He admits to Ysgrid that she once pleased him, but now desires to be his sole wife. Ysgrid amusedly comments on the girl's soft and blonde nature. Upon reaching the inn, Theon finds it crowded, with Wex, his squire, winning at a game of dice. Theon interrupts the game and, despite Wex's lack of response, instructs him to leave. Wex, born mute but clever, is the base-born son of one of Lord Botley's half-brothers, and Theon had taken him as a squire as part of the price for his horse. Wex is taken aback upon seeing Ysgrid, and Theon instructs him to saddle the horses quickly. Theon's own mount, a formidable stallion named Smiler, impresses Ysgrid. The Iron Islands typically lack good horses due to the rocky terrain, and many islanders are more comfortable on longships than in the saddle. However, Theon, having spent 10 years in Winterfell, values a good mount and is fortunate to have acquired Smiler from Lord Botley, who found the horse too challenging. Smiler, with a black hide and a fiery temperament, suits Theon well, considering his size. As Theon mounts, Ysgrid inquires about the horse's name, and Theon introduces him as Smiler. The horse earned his name from Theon's acknowledgement that he smiles at unconventional things, a trait shared by those who appreciate the irony in situations. Theon offers Ysgrid a hand and helps her mount in front of him. As they ride, he wraps his arms around her, providing an intimate connection. Ysgrid asks if Theon is smiling at that moment, and he affirms that he is. Despite Ysgrid's unkempt hair and a faded pink scar on her neck, Theon appreciates her scent: salt, sweet, and woman. As they ride beyond Lordsport, Theon attempts to get intimate with Ysgrid, but she warns him to keep his hands on the rein, or the horse might throw them off. Theon playfully talks about the weather and shares stories of the men he killed in the Whispering Wood. Despite Ysgrid's resistance, Theon persists in his advances. Ysgrid questions Theon about his family, and he reveals that he is the heir to Pike and the Iron Islands. He dismisses the idea of strong uncles posing a threat to him, and discusses his sister Asha, describing her unflatteringly. Theon insists that his uncles Aerion and Victarion are not a threat to him, with Aerion being devoted to the drowned god and Victarion being a loyal but not overly ambitious warrior. Ysgrid expresses concern about Euron Croweye, the third brother, citing rumors of his cunning and infamous ship, Silence. Theon speculates that Euron may be dead, and if he's alive, he has been away for so long that he might be considered a stranger. Ysgrid agrees and mentions that Ironborn would not accept a stranger on the Sea Stone chair, the ruler's seat. Theon reflects on the fact that he too might be seen as a stranger after his 10 years away. This realization makes him frown, but he is determined to prove himself now that he has returned, especially with his father still alive. The dynamics of Theon's family and the potential threats from his uncles are a source of tension and uncertainty as he contemplates his place in the Iron Islands. As Theon and Ysgrid approach Pike, Theon contemplates fondling her breast, but refrains due to the earlier discussion about his uncles, which has dampened his ardor. They discuss Theon's family dynamics and his position as Lord Balon's heir. Theon promises Ysgrid an honored place at the feast and kisses her lightly on the nape of her neck. Ysgrid suggests wearing one of Lady Greyjoy's gowns and speculates about Lady Greyjoy's feelings, urging Theon to visit her. However, Theon claims he is too busy, but hints at a possible visit in the future. Ysgrid playfully mentions her pregnancy, exciting Theon, who demands proof, who humorously suggests seeing her breasts grow ripe and tasting her mother's milk. Theon assures her that they will keep their affair secret from her husband, Sigrin, the shipwright. As Theon narrates tales of Winterfell and war, he finds Ysgrid easy to talk to and contemplates keeping her. Theon thinks of Sigrin as a tragic waste, contrasting him with the witty Ysgrid. Upon reaching Pike, the gates are open, and Theon rides through with Ysgrid. They are welcomed by barking hounds, and Theon's attempts to control them are ignored. When a stableman addresses Ysgrid as Lady Asha, Theon is shocked to realize that Ysgrid is, in fact, his sister Asha in disguise. Asha reveals her motive for not disclosing her identity earlier, saying she wanted to see who Theon had become. She teases him about her changed appearance and mocks him with an evil grin before crossing the bridge with her familiar saunter-sway walk. Feeling betrayed, Theon clouts Wex for not warning him about Asha's disguise and for seemingly enjoying the revelation. The shocking revelation of Ysgrid's true identity adds a new layer of complexity to Theon's return to Pike, impacting his relationships and his understanding of the world he left behind. In his chambers, Theon reflects on the embracing encounter with Asha and feels humiliated by his own actions. Consumed by resentment, he contemplates his place at Pike, feeling like an outsider. He decides to attend the feast in plain and somber attire. Entering the hall, Theon is largely ignored by the gathered lords and captains, and he takes a seat beside Asha. Lord Balon is present in the sea stone chair, carved in the shape of a kraken. The feast is lively, featuring music, dancing, and finger dancers performing the axe-spinning finger dance. Asha taunts Theon about his choice of clothing and mocks his previous affections. Theon, in turn, questions Asha about her secret marriage to Sigrun the Shipwright. Asha revels in her revelations, revealing that her marriage is a secret, and she continues to mock Theon. The atmosphere becomes increasingly hostile, culminating in a dramatic moment where Asha catches an axe thrown by a dancer and slams it onto Theon's trencher, causing a mess and further humiliation for him. The hall erupts in laughter, even Lord Balon and Uncle Victarion. Embarrassed and angered, Theon attempts a feeble grin and swears revenge in his thoughts. Asha offers further criticism, questioning Theon's knowledge of the Iron Islands and the loyalty he can inspire. She emphasizes the importance of understanding the Ironborn way of life. Theon, defensive, asserts his lawful position as prince, but faces Asha's reminder that the Ironborn make their own laws. Then Theon feels a deep sense of disappointment and alienation. He reflects on the stark differences between the Pike he remembered and the reality he now faces. Theon's return is marked by mockery, disdain, and a growing realization that his understanding of his homeland is outdated. At the banquet, it is a modest affair, featuring a sequence of fish stew, black bread, and a bland goat. The most appealing dish for Theon is an onion pie. Ale and wine continue to flow well after the conclusion of the meal. Lord Balon Greyjoy rises from the sea stone chair, instructing those on the dais to join him in his solar. He leaves without further explanation, flanked by 2 guards, and his brothers quickly follow suit. Theon rises to pursue them. Asha playfully teases him for being in a hurry, stating that their father has waited for many years and can wait a bit longer. She suggests that he might actually catch up with their uncles, one intoxicated with seawater and the other a dim-witted giant. Annoyed, Theon retorts that he doesn't chase after anyone, and Asha counters, implying his eagerness for women. Theon, irritated, asserts that he didn't grab her intimate parts, and Asha playfully responds that she doesn't have those, reminding him of his previous advances. Blushing, Theon declares himself a man with normal desires, and Asha, continuing the banter, gives him a suggestive squeeze. Theon, startled, suggests that he guides her to port through marriage, and she clearly replies that marriage isn't for him. When he rules, he claims he'll send her to the Silent Sisters, and he leaves unsteadily to find his father. In the rain, Theon reaches the swaying bridge to the sea tower, his stomach churning like the waves. Gripping the rope tightly, he pretends it's Asha's neck he's holding. In the damp and drafty solar, Lord Balon, buried under seaskin robes, sits before a brazier with his brothers on either side. Victarion discusses tides and winds, but Lord Balon silences him, announcing his plans. A message from Oldwyck reveals that Dagmere is bringing the drums and stone houses. Depending on favourable winds, they'll sail when they arrive, or Theon will. Lord Balon assigns Theon to lead 8 longships north to harry the stony shore, raid fishing villages, and sink ships. Aerion and Dagmere will accompany him. Theon, surprised, questions the practicality of achieving much with only 8 longships. Lord Balon dismisses his concerns, outlining the mission's objectives. Asha, Lord Balon's daughter, is assigned to lead 30 longships around Sea Dragon Point, landing north of Deepwood Motte. The plan is to capture the castle swiftly. Arya expresses delight at the prospect of having a castle, and Lord Balon encourages her to take one. Theon bites his tongue, knowing Deepwood Motte is the Glover stronghold, and believes he should be the one sent to capture it. Victarion, another brother, is tasked with the main thrust, aiming to capture Moat Catelyn and secure the neck. Lord Balon emphasizes the strategic importance of holding Moat Catelyn to cut off Robb Stark's retreat. Theon, unable to contain himself, questions the feasibility of the plan, considering the lords in their castles. However, Lord Balon asserts that the southern lords have gone with Robb Stark, leaving behind cravens, old men, and green boys who will yield or fall. He predicts Winterfell may resist for a year, but the rest will be under their control, and the people will become thralls and salt wives. Aerion Dampier raises his arms, invoking the drowned god's wrath, and Victarion intones, "What is dead can never die." Lord Balon and Arya echo the words, and Theon reluctantly mumbles along. The plan is set. In the midst of an intensified rainfall, Theon Greyjoy stands on a swaying rope bridge, feeling the downpour increase. The bridge twists beneath his feet, and he halts at its center, contemplating the rocks below. The waves create a crashing roar, and he tastes the salt spray on his lips. A sudden gust of wind disrupts his balance, causing him to lose his footing and stumble to his knees. Arya, his sister, comes to his aid, helping him rise. "You can't hold your wine either, brother." Leaning on her shoulder, Theon allows her to guide him across the rain-slick boards. "I liked you better when you were Eskrid," he accuses her. She laughs. "That's fair. I liked you better when you were 9. It's so cool that this chapter foreshadows the entire Kingsmoot plotline, found in A Feast for Crows, with the introduction of Theon's uncles, the Ironborn culture, and most importantly, the black reputation of Euron Greyjoy. Moreover, cutting Victarion and Aeron from the show was a huge mistake, because they are what help give the Iron Islands their distinctive feel. Without them, the Ironborn kind of just feel like caricatures. In Chapter 27, on the walls of Qarth, men beat gongs to herald Daenerys' coming, while others blow curious horns that encircle their bodies like great bronze snakes. A column of cavalry emerges from the city as her honor guards. The riders wear scaled copper armor and snouted helms with copper tusks and long black silk plumes, and sit high on saddles inlaid with rubies and garnets. Their camels are dressed in blankets of 100 different hues. "Qarth is the greatest city that ever was or ever will be," Pyat Pri tells her, back amongst the bones of Vaes Toloro. "It is the center of the world, the gate between north and south, the bridge between east and west, ancient beyond memory of man, and so magnificent that Sathos the Wise puts out his eyes after gazing upon Qarth for the first time, because he knows that all he sees thereafter shall look squalid and ugly by comparison." Dani takes the warlock's words well salted, but the magnificence of the great city is not to be denied. 3 thick walls encircle Qarth, elaborately carved. The outer is red sandstone, 30 feet high, and decorated with animals. The middle wall, 40 feet high, is grey granite alive with scenes of war. The innermost wall is 50 feet of black marble, with carvings that made Dani blush until she tells herself that she is being a fool. She is no maid. If she can look on the grey wall scenes of slaughter, why should she avert her eyes from the sight of men and women giving pleasure to one another? The outer gates are banded with copper, the middle with iron. The innermost are studded with golden eyes, all open at Dani's approach. As she rides her silver into the city, small children rush out to scatter flowers in her path. They wear golden sandals and bright paint, no more. All the colours that had been missing from Vaes Toloro find their way to Qarth. Buildings crowd about her, fantastical as a fever dream in shades of rose, violet and umber. She passes under a bronze arch fashioned in the likeness of 2 snakes mating, their scales delicate flakes of jade, obsidian and lapis lazuli. Slim towers stand taller than any Dani has ever seen, and elaborate fountains fill every square, wrought in the shapes of griffins and dragons and manticores. The Qartheen line the streets and watch from delicate balconies that look too frail to support their weight. They are tall, pale folk in linen and samite and tiger fur, every one a lord or lady to her eyes. The women wear gowns that leave one breast bare, while the men favor beaded silk skirts. Dani feels shabby and barbaric as she rides past them in her lion-skin robe with black drogon on one shoulder. Her Dothraki call the Qartheen milkmen for their paleness, and Khal Drogo dreams of the day when he might sack the great cities of the east. She glances at her blood riders, their dark, almond-shaped eyes giving no hint of their thoughts. Is it only the plunder they see, she wonders. How savage we must seem to these Qartheen. Pyat Pri conducts her little Khalasar down the center of a great arcade where the city's ancient heroes stand thrice life-size on columns of white and green marble. They pass through a bazaar in a cavernous building whose latticework ceiling is home to 1,000 gaily colored birds. Trees and flowers bloom on the terraced wall above the stalls, while below it seems as if everything the gods have put into the world is for sale. As Daenerys Targaryen arrives in Qarth, she is approached by the merchant prince, Xaro Zondaxis, causing her silver to shy away due to the horse's discomfort around camels. Xaro, perched on an ornate horn saddle, offers her anything she desires. However, Pyat Pri, a blue-lipped warlock, dismisses the need for material possessions, inviting Daenerys to the House of the Undying for truth and wisdom. Xaro, eager to impress, boasts of his ability to provide Daenerys with sunlight, sweet water, and luxurious silks. He even mentions the 13 setting a crown of black jade and fire opal upon her head. Daenerys, caution of sorcery due to past experiences, expresses her desire for the Red Castle at King's Landing and urges the people of Qarth to support her with ships and swords to reclaim her rightful throne. Pyat Pri gracefully agrees to Daenerys' command, and Xaro praises her wisdom beyond her years. However, he shares a saying about warlocks having houses built of bones and lies, questioning their declining reputation in Qarth. Daenerys, curious about the reverence for warlocks, engages in a conversation with Xaro, who compares them to feeble old soldiers boasting about past glory. He warns that Pyat Pri gifts will turn to dust. So Jorah Mormont advises her to avoid both Xaro and Pyat Pri, emphasizing the warlock's pretense to power. As they navigate the bustling bazaar, Jorah, adorned in the attire of the Seven Kingdoms, expresses discomfort with the city's smell, urging Daenerys to avoid lingering. Daenerys, smiling, suggests the scent might be from the camels, finding the Qartheen themselves sweet. Reflecting on her relationship with Jorah, Daenerys acknowledges the protective bond, feeling both safe and saddened by the realization that she wishes she could love him more. Amidst the complex dynamics and power plays in Qarth, Daenerys strategizes and assures the intentions of those around her, determined to use the resources offered to pursue her quest for the Iron Throne. Xaro Zondaxis graciously offers Dani the hospitality of his home in the city, but she is taken aback by the sheer grandeur of his palace, surpassing even Magister Illyroy's opulent manse in Pentos. Xaro assures her that his home can comfortably accommodate her entire entourage, including horses. An entire wing is designated for her, featuring private gardens, a marble bathing pool, a scrying tower, and a warlock's maze. Slaves are assigned to attend to her every need, and her private chambers boast green marble floors and walls adorned with colorful silk hangings that shimmer with the slightest breeze. Dani expresses gratitude for Xaro's generosity, but he insists that no gift is too great for the Mother of Dragons. Xaro, an elegant man with a bald head and a beak-like nose, adorned with rubies, opals, and jade, promises a lavish feast and musical homage from the 13, Qarth's ruling council. Despite anticipating the arrival of Qarth's elite to witness her dragons, Dani thanks Xaro before dismissing him. Pyat Pri and his promises to petition the Undying Ones follow suit, leaving Dani with a gift, an ointment claiming to allow her to see the spirits of the air. The last to depart is Quaithe, the Shadowbinder, who issues a cryptic warning to beware of all, as the spectacle of her dragons will attract relentless attention, leading to lust and desire fueled by the power of the dragons. Ser Jorah Mormont acknowledges Quaith's truthfulness, though he harbors distrust toward her. Dani expresses her confusion over Quaith's cryptic messages, contrasting with the explicit promises made by Pyat and Xaro. Troubled by the fact that she has never seen Quaith's face, Dani recalls the betrayal by Mirri Maz Duur and decides to keep a vigilant watch. Addressing her blood riders, Dani orders them to guard the dragon wing of the palace and ensure the dragon's safety. Feeling limited by the parts of Quaith shown to them by Pyat Pree, she sends Ricardo to explore further, instructing him to bring back insights into the hidden areas forbidden to men. To Ser Jorah, she assigns the task of investigating the docks, hoping to find information about ships from Westeros. Ser Jorah expresses concern about the potential danger in returning to Westeros due to the usurper, but Dani insists that Jogo can guard her in his absence. Recognizing Ser Jorah's linguistic skills and the Dothraki mistrust of the sea, she deems him the most suitable for the task. Despite his reluctance, Ser Jorah agrees to gather information about the ships, crews, and their destinations. After the departure of the men, Dani's handmaids attend to her, removing her travel-stained silks. She heads to a marble pool in the shade, enjoying the cool water and the company of tiny golden fish that playfully nibble at her skin. Dani daydreams about the Red Keep in King's Landing, longing for gardens filled with lavender and mint. However, thoughts of home unsettle her. Without Khal Drogo, her formidable husband, and with only her Dothraki blood riders at her side, she contemplates the challenges of conquering the Seven Kingdoms. Doubts plague her as she questions how to overthrow formidable foes like Robert Baratheon and the Lannisters. As evening falls, Dani is feeding her dragons when Ser Jorah returns with Kuhuro Mo, captain of the Cinnamon Wind, who reveals the usurper's death. The revelation of Robert Baratheon's death sparks hope in Dani, and she learns of the power struggles and turmoil in King's Landing with the ascension of King Joffrey, the internal conflict among the Lannisters and Baratheons, and the fall of Eddard Stark. Dani revels in the chaos among her enemies and the prospect of a weakened Westeros. She dismisses the honor of Ned Stark and sees the Lannisters as traitors to the true king, her deceased brother Viserys. Dani contemplates the changing dynamics in Westeros and acknowledges the complexities of the power vacuum. Kuhuro Mo, having brought her the news, receives her gratitude. However, Dani expresses disappointment when she learns that his ships won't return to Westeros for a year or more. Despite this, she gifts him with her favor and the promise of a great reward upon her return to King's Landing. After Kuhuro Mo's departure, Ser Jorah warns Dani about speaking too freely about her plans, fearing that the information will spread. Dani, feeling empowered by the news of Robert's death, dismisses the caution, stating that the world should know her purpose. Ser Jorah insists that the death of one ruler does not guarantee her success, emphasizing the need for fleets, gold, armies, and alliances. Dani counters Ser Jorah's skepticism, asserting her maturity and the blood of the dragon flowing through her veins. She recognizes her differences from Viserys and assures Ser Jorah that she is not the frightened girl he met in Pentos. The conversation ends with a kiss, and Dani asserting that dragons die, but so do dragon slayers, hinting at her determination to face challenges head-on. So, Preston Jacobs has a really good theory that Qarth's history gives evidence for the Red Waste being a radioactive wasteland, which is what killed Dora in the previous chapter through radiation poisoning. Or, the Red Waste is evidence of some kind of catastrophic events, since the three gates seem to show the history of Qarth. Dani took the warlock's words well salted. But the magnificence of the great city was not to be denied. 3 thick walls encircled Qarth, elaborately carved. The outer was red sandstone, 30 feet high, and decorated with animals. Snakes slithering, kites flying, fish swimming, intermingled with wolves of the Red Waste, and stripped horses and monstrous elephants. The middle wall, 40 feet high, was grey granite, alive with scenes of war. The clash of sword and shield and spear, arrows in flight, heroes at battle and babes being butchered, pyres of the dead. The innermost wall was 50 feet of black marble with carvings that made Dani blush until she told herself that if she could look on the grey whale scenes of slaughter, why should she avert her eyes from carvings of men and women giving pleasure to one another? So the innermost wall would be the first built, and it is the tallest at 50 feet. Not only that it is made out of marble, making it by far the most impressive, the next wall is only 40 feet high and made of granite, which is less impressive and depicts acts of war and destruction. Maybe built out of necessity because suddenly war started to become more common than it had before. Finally, the last outer wall is the least impressive and made of red sandstone, but was probably built out of necessity because the people on the outside from Vaes Toloro and so on were desperate to get inside Qarth. So what does this tell us? Well, Qarth used to be a more technologically advanced civilization, but over time, something caused a regression in technology and this resulted in war, which explains the building of the second wall showcasing this bloody era in the Qarthian history. And finally, the third wall reflects the extinction-level threat that caused the landscape outside Qarth to become a desert and resulted in Vaes Toloro and all the other cities not connected to the coastline to become uninhabitable. So, what happened? Well, it could be global warming, a terrible famine, a plague, or, as we like to speculate, a radioactive catastrophe to explain why the environment outside Qarth collapsed so quickly into a red waste. And we know it was somewhat recent since the Qartheen are pale, meaning this red waste might only be centuries old. Lastly, further evidence for the sudden decline in technology comes from the text when it reads, "The outer gates were banded with copper, the middle with iron. The innermost were studded with golden eyes." Copper is a far more primitive material compared to iron, and so is iron when compared to gold and marble. Anyway, that's it for A Clash of Kings Part 2, Daenerys. We have 3 more parts before moving on to A Storm of Swords. Please like and subscribe. Once again, thanks to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Check them out with the QR code on screen or link in the description.